All right, guys, welcome to episode 13 of the Drew Pavlou Show. Episode 13. This is my 13th stream in 13 days. I have committed myself to try stream 100 times in 100 days. So we're going to do a debate today with Lawrence McIntyre. Lawrence McIntyre is a self-described Australian ethno-nationalist. He is of the far right. Before people try to cancel me for having this debate, I mean, I debated literally a communist yesterday. Today, I will debate somebody of the far right. I will basically debate anybody, provided, I will debate almost anybody, provided, they don't go into death threats. They don't go into, direct threats against me of violence. I will debate almost anybody. Now, I'm just going to add Lawrence. I'm just going to send him the stream link. 1 second, guys. If you're watching, please consider joining on YouTube. Okay, I've now sent him the link, and I suspect he'll be joining in a second. All right, so he'll be joining in a second, Lawrence McIntyre. And yeah, look, I debated a communist yesterday. I'll debate a guy who's basically a self-described fascist today. I will debate people really from any walk of life. I haven't debated an Islamist yet. I would like to debate, an Islamist at some point, but they seem to be pretty hard to debate. I actually tried to ask, the most prominent ISIS hate preacher in Australia to debate me. Wissam, he did, and he told me he's responded with a death threat. Look, I will basically debate anybody at any time. I would like to debate. I'd like to debate a jihadist at some point next. I haven't been able to do that yet. Is he a politician? American here? Don't know who he is. I guess he's just a media figure. I don't think he's actually a politician or anything like that. You should do a stream discussing Greek Orthodox theology and tradition. Would be an interesting digression from the political content. Actually, cool idea. Maybe I will do that at some point in the future. I would like to talk actually about, Greek Orthodox faith. I have to admit, I'm not the most perfect Greek Orthodox Christian. I haven't gone to church in a while, and that's, on me. I am a Greek Orthodox Christian, and it is an important thing to me, my faith. I do believe in God. I do believe in Jesus Christ. And I think the Greek Orthodox tradition is a very beautiful tradition. But yes, some guy goes, he's a chud with an iPhone. Now, look, I've sent him the invite link. He hasn't responded yet. And listen, here's the thing. This debate was organized 20 minutes ago, right? So, I'm not running away from anybody here. He asked me 20 minutes ago. I said, sure, why not? Because I am going to try stream every single day. And, debates, it's good to debate people. People will know that my position is sort of a more liberal centrist type position. And yeah, look, I like to debate people from all sorts of extremes. Drew should debate Kemal Ataturk. Well said. Malaki, hopefully I'll be able to debate next week. What would you actually like to debate, Malaki? I'm happy to debate. I'm interested in what you actually want to debate. Okay, I think Lawrence is almost here. Okay. Now, I'm going to add Lawrence to the stage. Now, listen, Lawrence. All right. You there? Is your audio working?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Maybe can you turn it up a little bit?
Yeah. I'll get closer.
Okay. Now, listen, Lawrence, I'm happy to debate, and we'll debate, subjects like immigration and Australian identity and all these sorts of things. I'm just going to say straight up, obviously I don't want the stream to get shut down or banned by YouTube. So just very obviously, we're not going to. I can't allow you to have any, slurs, that sort of thing.
No, I don't really use slurs.
Yeah, let's keep it to a more intellectual and rational thing. Obviously, we have disagreements, but yeah. Now, so Lawrence, I think I first became aware of your existence when you crashed the Prime Minister's press conference at the start of the election campaign. So do you want to start by telling people why you did that, and maybe just briefly explain your position? So you're a self-described ethno-nationalist, and I guess you would identify as far right. So maybe explain your position and start that off that way.
Yeah, sure. So I've been kind of protesting immigration I started protesting COVID during the lockdowns on my TikTok page. And then I did that for like a year, and I filmed a lot of like the protests and all that kind of stuff. And I shut it down, and then I was like, I'm done with politics. And then I started realizing how bad the immigration crisis.
1 second, Lawrence. I was going to say, before we get into it, do you want to give it a minute? You share the link as well to your followers.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, want to get it. Go on.
Let's give it 1 minute so we can get some more people to join.
Yeah, good, bro.
Yeah, no worries,
man.
Yeah, because I think we've got it says 500 people on Twitter and about 20 people on YouTube. So yeah, it's good to get some more. I'll just share the link as well on my Discord and stuff.
Yeah, gotcha. Debate with Drew Pavlou. Leave that one out.
Okay. 1 second, just gonna post the link as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I posted it.
Cool. Okay. And I'm just posting it one more time too, and then yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's get back into it. You can sort of just like give a bit of an overview of your background and where you stand, and maybe explain your protest against the Prime Minister Albanese.
Yeah. So as I was saying, so I started doing like anti-immigration content like a year and a half ago. After just like contemplating the housing crisis a lot and that kind of stuff, and then I did that for a year, and then made some connections around like in the scene a bit, and then I caught wind that Albanese was at a Medicare center like not too far from me, so I thought I'd go down and try and like ask a question. And I basically just walked into a Medicare center and just like went up to the press conference and filmed, and then I didn't expect the cameras to turn on me. They all kind of just turned on me, and like after I asked Albanese, like, do you think 1.8 million immigrants over 5 years is gonna overburden the medical system? Which it is overburdening the medical system. Like there's clear reports about that. And then kind of like popped off a bit. I've been riding the wave ever since.
Yep. Yeah, no, I saw that. And listen, I'm gonna start by saying, my personal position is I think the current migration rate in Australia is too high. I actually want to see it lowered. There are obviously big issues with, for example, the housing crisis, strain on infrastructure, etc. So I mean, I actually think the migration rate should be lowered. But I think probably the main difference between us is, at the end of the day, you think that Australia should basically just be a white ethno state, I suppose. I mean, I've seen your tweet. I think I've seen you tweet before saying that you think that all Muslims and Jews should be deported. Obviously, I would disagree with that. I mean,
I think that's like it's all half a ball on Twitter. My official policy is I think you should deport all the international students and all the temporary residents, and then we need like a moratorium on mass immigration for like 5 years, and then we need to have a proper national discussion over like Australian identity and what is an Australian and the diaspora.
So what level of migration would you actually accept? Because look, my stance is, while I want to lower migration, I still think we need some level of migration in this country, because we do have an aging
the aging population. But the main people we're bringing in are like in the mid-30s, so it makes no sense with the aging population, because we're just bringing in people who are going to get older quicker anyway. If we put our focus on raising the natural birth rates, then we would obviously
messed up. 1 second.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, 1 second. Sorry, I'm just going to fix that.
I'm going to go freehand.
Yeah. Hang on. Sorry, 1 second. I don't know what happened with my camera.
No, you're right. Let me get the chat up. Let me see what people are saying.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. My bad. All right.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. So what I was saying is, like, if we put the focus on raising the natural birth rate, which no politician talks about ever, then we're setting up a future for the country, as opposed to bringing in 30-year-olds who are just gonna, not only 30-year-olds, but 30-year-olds who are bringing in their families as well. Like these people, they bring in their families as well. They bring in like their elderly parents and their elderly grandparents. So
look, one of the big problems here, I mean, I'm not fully familiar with what you've written before or what your stance is. I suspect that you would see mass migration in terms of I mean, have you described it in the past as a sort of replacement type thing? I guess.
Yeah. I think it's
Okay, so you see it in ethno-nationalist terms as like the great replacement, etc. How do you account for the fact that one of the major problems is that there is actually a big problem with, for example, the aging of society. There is there is a crisis basically all around the world right now when it comes to fertility rates. So, for example,
Yeah.
It's not just Australia and Western countries that have this problem. It's surprisingly enough, basically every single country on Earth. So you see it all across
Yeah.
East Asia. You see, for example, Korea is like 0.8. You see Taiwan is like 0.9, China 0.9. China ranges from like 0.7 to 0.9. You see it in Europe, obviously. You see it, surprisingly enough, India. Like, so for example, I know like Ozpil is always going on about how, like, there's a grand, I mean, Ozpil is talking about, Indian migration, etc. Well, I think probably a big function of this is the fact that, the people that are more likely to migrate are probably populations that are younger overall. And at this point, that is still countries that are more developing. At the same time, though, surprisingly enough, even India has now seen a migration. They've actually now seen their fertility rate cross below the replenishment level. So I think even in India right now, it's less than 2.1. And so we're seeing this. We're seeing this all around the world, and it is a global thing, and it's actually quite concerning. And look, here is part of the problem, Lawrence. You look at countries like Hungary, and I'm sure you probably like see Hungary as like, base trad society. It is a right-wing government over there. They have put a lot of money into trying to subsidize increases to the birth rate, etc. But arguably that has not had a major effect in Hungary. They're still below replenishment level. And my knowledge of, for example, the Russian government's attempts to increase subsidies for births, etc., is that they put major amounts of money into this stuff, and yet they've only really seen like a 0.1% increase to fertility rates, etc.
Government subsidies aren't going to solve the problem. It's a cultural and it's an economic problem. So, like, obviously the first one is like cost of living and the housing crisis, which means that we can't afford to have kids, or we can't even afford to have a stable home. For one, just build a strong relationship with your partner. Like, it's hard to live just with a partner now. And then two, of course, you can't raise a family if you can barely even afford your rent. And so there's that, and then there's obviously there's the cultural issues, which is like, we're an extremely feminist country in Australia, and basically the universities at this point are just these echo chambers for left-wing ideologues, and women are just like going crazy in this country. And then, I mean, we can get into like the red pill stuff though, that kind of stuff though. But it's multifaceted.
Like, I mean, you can say this, right? But you see this. I mean, Hungary, for example, isn't a feminist country. Russia's not really a feminist country, and they've still got the same problem where they've still got very low rates of fertility. You see China's not necessarily a feminist country. They've still got the same problem.
Well, I mean,
it is a global issue. I don't think you can just say that it's just women.
You got to pin it down to each country. For example, like Japan, right? They got the hikikomori men, right? And I think that's like it's economic there and it's cultural, because in Japan, ever since like the Second World War ended, their economy's just become like hyper capitalist to an extent where basically to live in Japan, you live in like little boxes, right? Like they live in little rooms, they have these tiny little houses. Let me finish my points. Let me land my plane. Okay, but like, they cramp up into these boxes, and it's just like hyper corporate. Like they work like crazy hours. They try and just like compete with each other and their bosses. And then, so how are you expecting to, create an environment where people want to meet each other and have kids in that environment? And also I think, online dating is a big thing as well, with like women's expectations and that kind of stuff. And I think, a lot of Asian women just don't like Asian men anymore, which is like brutal. But I think that's because the global dating market's opened up, and it's like fuck things up just for the East.
Look, I don't think it's as simple as just saying, women don't want it. I mean, this is literally a global problem where, like, India, for example, is still a developing country, and they've just literally just gone below 2.1. So, I mean, I think literally the only place in the world now where there's above replenishment rate fertility is Africa. And look, there just are massive structural problems when it comes to economics. I mean, people in the West.
Why would you say it's happening around the world? Yeah.
Look, I think it's actually it's something inherent to modernity. Like, as people become more educated, as people, you know, become part of the modern, hyper-connected, essentially capitalist world, they seem to basically want to have less kids. And look, the problem is, right? Like, literally the only
They don't want. They don't. It's not
What'd you
just
say?
default. Like when they get educated, and it's like, oh,
But it does.
the
It
enlightened
basically
way
does.
is to not have enlightenment isn't realizing kids suck. Like,
No, I'm not.
like we,
Dude, I love. Dude, I'm somebody who wants to have a large family, so I'm not necessarily.
yeah,
I'm not like cheering that on. I'm just trying to observe this from a realist perspective. Like, I mean, we've
yeah,
got a comment here from Percy, your mate, who literally says modernization leads to lower birth rates. And what
yeah, it
do you
does.
actually do then? Because if you can't reverse modernization, like no one actually wants to go back to living in like huts like Afghanistan. So
Or
what do you
no,
do?
no, you can reverse the cultural consequences of modernization, right?
Okay,
Like,
explain
so
that, right?
like again, so like again, we've either got to break down the cultural issues or we've got to break down the economic issues because they're the two sides of the coin. So you like if you actually want to get into the details, you got to pick a side and then stick with it. Because I can talk about the cultural issues. I can go back to like
Okay,
the sexual revolution,
okay.
Alfred
How about
Kinsey, all that kind of stuff, or I could go into the economic stuff. So
well, go into a bit of both then, and explain to
okay,
me why you think this is the case. And the reason I just want to say,
well,
right, the reason, because somebody here was just saying, what's the debate topic? The reason why we're
mm,
talking about fertility rates right now is because, I mean, that does fit into the broader issue of immigration. I actually do think we need to lower
yeah,
immigration. I don't want to have open border policies, but I still think that there
yeah,
needs
yeah,
to be
yeah.
some level of migration because, look, the problem is, I
Well,
think the fundamental problem is that people in Western societies and developed societies, they expect a certain level of material comfort in their retirement, etc. That means
mm,
there's going to be just like, a big demand for healthcare workers and a big demand for people who can, just basically fulfill those roles. So I think that
yeah,
is
yeah,
just a long-term
but
structural issue. Yeah, but yeah, going back, let's have your discussion of why you think this is happening, economic and cultural.
yeah, well, so what? Cultural or economic? Which one do you want first?
Either one. Just go into
Okay.
either.
Well, let's do economic first, right? So, like, you go back to like the 50s, right? Before we had mass immigration, and we still had white Australia policy, and it kind of was still remaining. We had one of the best manufacturing industries in the world. We were producing cars. We had the wheat industry. We had the gold industry. We had the wool industry. We had all this industry in Australia. And then around the 70s, the trend of like globalization happened, and we had politicians in our institutions basically lobbying and pushing to abandon our manufacturing industry. So you got like the button car plan, for example, was the plan to ship our car manufacturing overseas to like Japan, all that kind of stuff. So we destroyed our manufacturing. And when you destroy your manufacturing, you basically just destroy high wage jobs because you're robbing the country of high ticket items, right? So now the only high ticket item that's left in Australia is housing, which isn't like, it's not a consumable in a way. Like a car breaks down for like a couple 50 years or people want to upgrade. A house is a lifetime thing. So now the only money in the country left, the only high ticket item is housing, which is just a speculative asset, which has caused this problem we've got now. And besides that, the only
Yeah,
other
look,
industries left is
I agree. Like, for example, housing is a disaster. The financialization of the housing market is a disaster. So I
yeah,
agree with you on that. Yeah, going on.
but my point really is that like all the profit margins that we used to have in this country, we're now giving overseas. We're shipping them overseas. So we extract our resource, we extract the iron and the coal and all that kind of stuff, and we just sell it overseas. They build our cars for us, we buy it back, then we charge GST on our own people. So it basically it's destroying the middle class, and what it led to, that as well as the sexual revolution in like the 70s, which is the cultural aspect of it, that led more women to working, and then that became, working wasn't a choice, I have to work. So that destroyed the family even more. And that birthed the childcare industry because now people had to work, and it's just destroyed the family. So there's that, and then the actual feminist issues, like the actual cultural issues. You can date that kind of stuff back to Kinsey, and like the male sexuality and the hippie movement. I think it's a combination of those two that came together, and it's just slowly made it harder and harder and harder to have kids. And at the same time, we're importing like hundreds and thousands of people every year, which is then it's robbing the workers of their leverage to try and fight for higher wages. So it's this circular, it's like this death spiral we're going in, where it's like we keep selling more and more of our industry overseas. Or you got things like keep the sheep, where we're like sacrificing our industry. And then at the same time, we're just encouraging all this leftist feminist ideology, which is corrupting the women, turning them to OnlyFans, turning them over all this kind of shit. And then at the same time, we're bringing all these immigrants, which is just fucking our cohesion. So it's like a multifaceted, death spiral.
I mean, okay, like here's the question though, right? You look at a country like Hungary, and it's literally run by like probably the most right. I mean, a lot of people would say Hungary is probably the most right-wing government in the sort of in the Western sphere, right? Like in Europe and North America, Hungary is probably maybe the most right-wing government. I mean, why is it the case that they still struggle with fertility? I mean,
you'd have to do it. You'd have to do an analysis. You'd have to do an analysis of their economy and their culture. So I mean, like I don't know much about like Hungary's culture or economy.
Like Hungary isn't doing mass migration, and they I mean, at least the government, right? Like the government sticks to sort of like a conservative view of the family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not a country that's celebrating feminism, blah blah. Sorry, the dog.
Well, what are their material standards like? I don't know much about Hungary. Like, I
mean, look, it's a first world developed country. Like, it's part of the European Union. I've been to Budapest before. Pretty beautiful city. Like,
okay,
they're pretty modern.
Basically, well, if the economy is all right and people are like Henry Ford had this idea like the family wage, right? Which was the wage that a man would get, and he'd afford to raise a whole family on that, just one person. So if you give people the family wage, then the only problem you're going to face is the cultural problem. So I would ask, you say Hungary is right wing. I haven't studied Hungary very much, so it's kind of a bad example for me. But you say they're right wing government, but are they culturally right wing? Like, they
make a big strong dance. I mean, if you were to ask, like for example, I saw a comment by Chris De Bruyne, right? I don't know if you're friends with Chris De Bruyne, but you do know him?
I don't know him though.
Oh, okay. Well, look, if you ask probably most right wingers, they would say Hungary. I mean, for example, for someone like Tucker Carlson basically holds Hungary up as the gold standard for conservative governments in the West. That's Tucker Carlson, for example. And like it's just interesting. They've spent massive amounts of money, like a significant amount of like their GDP, a significant amount of government spending has gone towards trying to increase fertility. They do lifetime tax write-offs basically for families that have multiple children, etc. But I mean, it's had some level of effect. Like their fertility rate has maybe gone up 0.1 or 0.2, but it's still below replenishment. And so I mean,
Well, again, I think we could,
right? I can agree that we need a lower migration, and I agree that in broad terms, I actually would agree that we want migration to be from culturally compatible places. We really need migrants to be able to assimilate, etc. But on the idea that you put before, where you were saying there should just be just have like a 5-year moratorium, basically no migration at all. I don't see how that's actually possible, considering like there would be big worker shortages, right? There would be big worker shortages just because we don't necessarily actually have the fertility rates. We don't have a replenishment rate in Australia. Like our population would start to climb.
No. I mean, the replenish rate thing is like, it's this idea that if we sent the migrants home, that instantly would just like fall into chaos. Like, again, like you don't take you like 5 years. Let me finish. It only take you like 5 years to fix the economy and get people, give the people enough incentive to have families again and get the birth rate up again. Like, it's not that hard. You're just banging. You're just finding a chick and you have kids and you make sure you get a house. Like, all the problems are
no country. This is the problem. No country on earth has been able to. No country that has gone through modernity, like for example, the only countries where there's still really high fertility rates is like Afghanistan. No country that's literally gone through.
I know. To be honest, look, I think it's the sexual revolution is a big part of it, and the dating market. So like as far as that goes.
Tell us what you want to see change when it comes to sexual mores, culture, that sort of thing.
Well, I'm Christian, so I'd advocate like Christian morality. But I think what's happened is you basically, when you destroy the family, you've taken the father out of the home. And so we've taken the father out of not only the home, but our society as a whole. So all our institutions, whether it's our hospitals, our universities, our police force, they're all become like super feminized. And that on top of like the sexual dating market, online dating, feminism, all this kind of stuff, it's basically just like flipped society upside down, right? Where now perhaps not a high view of women. No, I like women. Sorry, I saw the comment. But it's flipped society upside down, right? Where it's like women are kind of just going like haywire. There's nothing kind of like women. You can't criticize a woman anymore. You can't say, hey, you got to like stop doing these certain things. So that's why I've got all these 18-year-olds, fresh 18-year-olds going on OnlyFans. And do you know much about like red pill stuff? Have you looked into that?
I mean, look, I've heard a lot of these arguments. Look, my thing is, right?
No. Yeah. Have you or not? Have you looked into it?
Oh, look. I mean, I'm familiar with like the sort of like Andrew Tate red pill shit. I mean,
Okay. Okay. The main crux of it is, right, for online dating, for example, like 10% of the guys on online dating get like 90% of the matches, right? So what's happening is we've opened up the sexual dating market to the global world. And I honestly think that along with feminism, along with the weakening of the man's society, has made it so women are just looking for, and women getting educated, they're now looking for just unicorns. They're looking for just like guys that don't exist. And then men who like, and then hold on. But then men, we're getting having our wages like ripped from us, like with inflation and the cost of living, just wage stagnation, which is caused by immigration partially. So we can't even compete anymore. So now it's like this. It's just this crazy society where it's like women are the queens of the world, and they can go and do whatever they want, and then men are just like slowly like rotting and losing their buying power. And then women are like, no, eventually I'll find the investment I need from a high value man, and then they're waiting like 10 years, not having kids, becoming infertile, bada bing, bada boom, you're out of it, and then the men are just becoming like hikikomori men. It's fucked, dude.
So can I ask you, right? You were talking before, and you seem to talk about the education of women being a bad thing. So, I mean, what are the actual concrete things you want to see changed to stop the feminization of society, in your words?
Well, women getting educated isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there's a good quote from.
You're not necessarily fully Taliban on that. Okay, interesting.
No. But there's a good Thomas Sowell quote where he says that there's no such thing as solutions. There's only trade-offs. Okay.
Sorry, who's quote?
Thomas Sowell, not Sewell, Sowell, which he's the black economist.
I know.
Very different. But he says that, and I think like in regards to women going to university, like we sort of just pushed them into that without really weighing up the consequences of them getting educated, which is the fact that when they become educated, they then kind of like narrow down their dating market, right? So that they only want guys that are more educated than them, generally speaking. So I think that's just the trade-off that happens. And like I've spoken to lots of educated women about this stuff, and they agree. Like they said they want a guy that earns more than them, or that's more educated than them. And can
you tell us, right? We've got a funny comment here. Someone goes, "This guy wants white Sharia law." What actually is the difference here between like this and what, say, like hardline Islamists argue? Because you're essentially saying that women have been forced to be educated. They don't want to do that. It'd be better if we can major things like you. I'm saying that. Like what sorts of things do you want to see? Do you want to see, for example, like the banning of the birth control pill? Do you want to see? No.
I think banning anything works. I think it's like a moral, conscious, psychological thing. Like we've got to like kind of just become more aware and have more open discussions about these kind of things, which we're trying to have. But I think the left wing is particularly like into censorship with this kind of stuff. Like,
can I ask you, right? So you place a lot of this blame on women. Do you think
not women? No. I don't blame the women. Okay. I blame the society which has indoctrinated the women into following this lifestyle when they're taught that they do all these things, they check all these boxes, they go to university, they spend like 10 years of their life studying and following a career that they'll be happy, and then at the end of it they have no kids, and then our society's crumbling. Like I don't blame the women. I mean, I blame like the media, I blame the institutions, I blame the
what I want to ask you, right? Like, surely young blokes have a role to play here too. Because look, I would agree with you in terms of like, there are some things, for example, about like modern dating life and culture, like for example, like the pornification of society. The proliferation of hardcore porn online. That stuff is bad. It's really bad for all people, both men and women. And I was going to say, I think there's a big constituency, for example, with young blokes, for example, and you've got like the sort of Andrew Tate type hustle university type culture. I think
I don't like Andrew Tate, by the way. I don't like Andrew Tate.
What I was going to say though, right, is like those people are part of they're right at the core of the issue as well, because like Andrew Tate is out there. He's advocating hedonism. He's advocating, mistreatment of women. He's basically
dude. Andrew Tate's a fucking cam pimp. He made all his money doing cam pimping, and then he's acting like he's like built these crazy businesses. It's like, dude, you just picked the most degenerate fucking loophole you could find in the system.
We agree on this one issue. So look, I
fuck
guess
China. Drew, hold on, Drew. Fuck China.
Yeah.
Can you say fuck China?
The Chinese Communist Party, not China, but.
Sorry. Yeah.
But look. On Andrew Tate and that sort of stuff, like, I think there's also just a really bad culture among a lot of young men too. I mean, you talk about the girls on the OnlyFans and stuff like that, but you also have to really blame a lot of young men who obviously they're the ones feeding into that culture, etc.
Yeah. I mean, I think the majority of blame should lie on men. I think we kind of like are allowing this to happen, and we're enabling it. But it's the problem right now with the institutions and women kind of teaming up against the men, and it's really hard, I think, because men, I think more than they'd like to admit, really care about the opinions of women. And when you here's the thing, right? Women basically have control over like socializing these days, I think. So in like universities, like to get into like cliques, to get into groups, you kind of have to get in with the chicks in a way. Like the guys will kind of just like tolerate whoever is having fun, but the chicks are a bit more picky with who actually gets invited. So if you're in university, for example, and you try to like be like a traditional man, and you try and stand up for things, you try to like draw boundaries, and you try to like pick up the slack and try to bear the burden of society and try to be the good man, you'll just get ostracized from social activity, and you'll just get pushed out and edged out of social life.
We've got a comment here from Malaki who says he's right. I was the only boy in my legal studies class, and I was bullied into submission.
And you just get once you're labelled as these things, you get kicked out, and then the next 4 years you're fucked, and then you lose your access to your network. So all this kind of, and obviously you don't get sex, you don't get hot chicks, and all that kind of stuff which young guys care about. So, and not only that, there's the legal ramifications, there's the institutional ramifications for speaking up, for trying to put your foot down. So there's all these reasons why men are just kind of like bitching out and just like shutting down, and then like I said, they go into hikikomori, man. They just watch porn, just do drugs, just fucking play video games, and then the women are just the ones going into education. Then they're like I said, they're narrowing their dating market, while the fucking decent men that could have been decent men are then going into little holes. And then while this is happening, while we're going further and further away from each other, we're bringing in millions of immigrants who are having kids and having fun and having like a traditional lifestyle, while the white people are just like suffering. So it's fucked.
But look, I think it's not as simple as just saying white people are the only people suffering this, right? Because
you know what I meant by that. I don't think
you were just talking
in
about
this context.
You were just talking about, for example, the cases of Japan. There's big problems with fertility in East Asia, etc. Look. I
answered why. I gave you some reasons why they're infertile. Right.
Look,
again, the cosmopolitan lifestyle that you have in Japan and you see in the cities of Australia, it doesn't incentivize you to have kids. No one wants to have kids in apartment blocks. Of course not. You want like a nice, healthy, relaxed environment.
I mean, I mean, it's interesting, but the problem I think is,
if you agree, right? You agree. The cosmopolitan lifestyle does not allow you to have kids.
Like you think so your argument sort of is like,
high density living, disincentivized having children.
Look, I would say, I think what we need to do as society is aspire towards everybody being able to own their own home. So yeah, I agree on that sense. And I agree
own your own home in a non-dense area with nice green places where maybe kids could go and play in, and that kind of stuff, right?
I mean, sure. I guess this is the problem though, right? Like, I still don't think this is the magic bullet for solving the fundamental problem, which is that in every type of society, you've got more conservative societies like Hungary, you've got, Russia's dealing with the same thing. Like we have not.
But Drew, just because all these countries have the same symptom doesn't mean they have the same problems. Okay, you have to analyze the problem individually. Right? Just because they have the same symptom, so just because every country has a declining birth rate doesn't mean they have the same problems that led to those symptoms.
I
So
mean,
every case is unique.
I mean, theoretically, yes, but it does just seem to be this common thing across like basically social science that a country hits a certain rate of development, like,
Yeah.
and then people just start having way less children.
Yeah. But again, there's no, it doesn't mean they have the same exact problems, right? Again, it's multifaceted. This is super complex stuff. You're talking about psychology, economics, like morals. You're talking about so many different things.
Sure.
Disagree with the high density. Across real estate does. Yeah, but here's the thing. What happens when you bring in all these migrants is that the developers start opting out of making the houses, so then the houses aren't affordable anymore. So the only thing that's left to develop is high density housing. So that's a bit of a stupid comment. Like,
should we go into the question of, I guess, the identity of Australia and stuff like that? Because I've got a lot of comments.
yeah, sure.
We've got a lot of
sure.
comments here saying like, stop chatting about 2013 Ben Shapiro feminist.
Yeah, this is old shit. Yeah.
Go into identity and look, like I want to say, like, I don't necessarily agree with your full analysis. I don't think like we can just say like it's just feminism and stuff like that. I think
I didn't say no. I did not say it was just feminist. I said it was a multifaceted issue.
Yeah, look, it's a multifaceted. In general, it's a multifaceted issue. Anyway, we'll go to the next question, which is, I guess, the identity of Australia.
I know. Well, I'm going to ask you one question on this. What would be your ideal migration rate per year?
I'm not sure off the top of my head what the ideal migration rate is. I think prior to COVID, the migration rate was relatively acceptable.
So what number?
I don't know, maybe 150, 200,000 a year, which I think is basically the number we had prior to COVID. Because right now it's like 500, 600,000. So I'd be saying we basically need to go back to pre-COVID levels, where it seemed to be pretty roughly sustainable prior to COVID.
Why do we need any more immigrants if we're in a housing crisis?
Look, I do agree that basically we should try and, as much as we can, link the rate of migration to the ability to complete housing in society. So I actually think, yes, we should try and link that. But I just think it's not sustainable to have like a full-blown pause, which is what you're advocating for, because I think then you have a problem, right, where you might have a massive, supply shock and a demand shock. Supply shock when it comes to labor, and
in which industries?
I mean, a lot of different industries.
Like, which main ones? Like, which ones would be the most detrimental?
I mean, it is the case that, a lot of migrants are going into sort of nursing, healthcare, that sort of thing.
But Drew, there was a report released where that explicitly said that mass immigration is the reason we have an overburdened medical system and that we're running out of beds. And you look at the stats, the beds, the available beds we have are just plummeting. So it's like, so you talk about we need these nurses, we need beds, and these immigrants coming in are going to add to filling those beds, It's a circular reasoning when you talk like that, because there's the demand for the beds, which then increases demand for the staff.
I mean, look, at the moment, we've still got pretty low. Our rate of unemployment in Australia is quite low at the moment. So that seems to indicate, right? Like if we were to suddenly expel like 1 million people, 2 million people, that would result in big labor shortages. If we've already got a low unemployment rate with massive population growth.
But dude, if you look at the graphs, like our private sector has been like crashing. It's all public jobs now, dude. Like the majority of the jobs that have been created in the past couple of years are all just public sector jobs, which the government is just writing into being. So again, like they talk about, the GDP is going up. Oh no, the economy's good. Like, unemployment's low. When it's like they're just creating the jobs and then they're just bringing money in, so the money gets pushed around and it looks like everything's good and happy. You got a bunch of people doing the productive sector of our economy is crashing. We had 50,000 tradies leave the trade last year. So how are we building homes? We've got 50,000 tradies leaving.
I mean, look, that is a disaster. But here's what I want to ask you, right? If we were to go to a rate of zero migration, which is what you're advocating for, how do you avoid massive economic, disruption across a range of industries? Because I don't know
what industry depends on migration except the university Ponzi scheme. industry.
I mean,
But
look,
the-
you know, it seems that there's a big need for people in you know, nursing, healthcare.
nursing's the only one people talk about. And I just explained to you that our medical system is failing because we can't treat the amount of people that are coming in. That was explicitly said in a report by the Australian Medical Institute Association. Okay, so they've explicitly said that. And then do you know what they do when they do this kind of shit is they explicitly say this kind of stuff. So they say the same with student housing reports. They say, oh yeah, we're running out of supply. So we need more funding. And then that money just goes more in, that money goes further into that bureaucracy, into that public sector, which is growing like a giant beast.
So, okay, two questions here, right? Okay, we've got the comments. One person says, you know, they're pointed to two particular industries, aged care and horticulture. Like we both know, for example, that, you know, there are a lot of backpackers that come into Australia and then they pick fruit and vegetables and they do that while they're, you know, backpacking. So it does seem that horticulture requires it.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. The only reason Australians won't do those jobs is because the wages aren't high enough, and the only reason that there isn't an incentive for the employers to raise their wages is because there's a mass influx of labour coming into the country via mass immigration, which is diluting wages. Okay, so you need pressure within the economy to force employers to raise their wages. The employer always has incentive to give the employee a low wage. He always wants to save as much money as possible. You have to be forced into that predicament, or you're a very immoral employer, like Henry Ford was. The fact that we're bringing in this excess labor, it's stagnating those wages in those horticultural jobs. Same thing goes with the nursing, the aged care industry.
Okay.
The only reason Australians don't want to do those jobs is because they're horrible. Like they're pretty rough jobs, and you don't get paid enough, and the hours are horrible.
I mean, here's the problem, right? You lift wages massively in horticulture. It's going to come through to high grocery prices for Australians, and people won't accept that though.
Well, again, then we can start pointing towards Woolworths and Coles, who are making record profits, not paying the farmers. Paying the farmers fuck all.
I also look. It's a difficult problem, right? Because I actually agree that Woolies and Coles are too concentrated. The supermarket, Australia concentrated. That said, their profit margins. When you actually look at their profit margins per person in Australia, right? They're pretty small. They're pretty small. Like I don't know if price controls in, right?
Okay, well then this gets back to the manufacturing thing. Like I said, the only way you get high wages is through manufacturing because you get high ticket items, right? Like I said, we're not making any high ticket items anymore. We're just exporting resources. Like a third tier economy or something. No, what is it called? It's called a service-based economy. We're a service-based economy. Hold on. I was getting to a point here. So the fact is, like raising wages, right? So yeah, the farmer can't raise his wages because he's not making enough money because he can't charge a high price for his goods because the person that he wants to sell his goods to doesn't have enough money to buy his goods at a higher rate because he himself isn't getting a higher wage. Okay, so the answer to this problem is you need an industry in Australia where people are getting really high wages, where that can somewhat trickle down. I don't like trickle down theory, but there has to be a place where the productivity is being focused and generated, which then brings in wealth to the country. Then that goes through the industries. So the fact that we've abandoned our manufacturing industry, it's taking all the wealth out of the country and it's put the wealth only in the hands of property investors and then the university industry, which doesn't tie into like buying produce at all. These guys.
So look, we've got a comment here, right? One of my mates is from a sugar growing. This is a person. He says one of my mates is from a sugar growing farm. One season they'll spend around $2 million and make 100K profit. That's with paper thin wages. What do you do if suddenly you're saying no more horticultural if you suddenly say we're not going to take backpackers in anymore, then presumably you'd have to be massively increasing wages. And how do you stop farms from collapsing and just going bankrupt straight away?
Yeah. Well, why can't you charge more for your goods?
Well, again,
as a farmer.
That, right? But the thing is, that will then be fed through into high grocery prices.
Yeah. But I mean, these things are meant to happen to keep up with inflation. The prices are meant to go up around the board. You're meant to raise wages to keep up with inflation, which then we'd see a rise in the grocery prices. If inflation stopped for 10 years and then we raised everything to match where we are, we'd be cool again. We'd be fine.
I mean,
So
you're right that like obviously you need some level of inflation. We don't want to have deflation, but
no, you don't need inflation, but no, you need to match. You need wages to match inflation, which they haven't done. Like we've gone back to 2008 wages.
Yeah, sure. But like I'm just giving you an example though, right? Like in this concrete scenario where say tomorrow you just shut down backpackers work in the horticulture industry, that's going to probably like overnight be fed through into like 15-20% high grocery prices for people on the shelves, and people will be pissed. So how do you
Yeah. Well, again, so I wouldn't advocate for that. I would say bring back manufacturing first, get that industry built up. So the only way you can do that is by making energy cheap, which gets into the whole gas carbon emissions problem we're having, where we're selling 80% of our gas to China and Japan for them to make a profit. But you know, we sell 80% of our gas to China and Japan. We use 7% of our gas to freeze that 80% to send it over to Japan. And we use 4% ourselves domestically. So we should have like basically free energy, which then should go into the manufacturing industry, which should build up in manufacturing.
You're actually right that there should be like a higher reserve for gas. I mean, what's the term for it? It's basically like reserving more for domestic capacity.
Gas reserve.
I agree with you on that.
Domestic gas reserves. We have none, zero on the East Coast.
Yeah, we actually have a problem where I think it was the Victorian government was talking about like literally building LNG terminals to import LNG when we're literally one of the largest gas, which is that itself is fucking retarded. So I agree with you on that one thing.
But that links to the manufacturing, right? Which then links to the overall health of the economy, which then links back to the horticultural industry.
Sure. Okay, but how are we going to, you know, in your scheme, you shut down immigration basically tomorrow. There's a 5-year moratorium. I presume, you know, that would be coupled with like, you know, high tariffs as well, etc. Like how do you actually, in concrete terms, rebuild the manufacturing industry?
Well, again, you got to start with energy. Okay, so you got to ditch all this green energy shit, all this net zero bullshit. I think it's all nonsense. Ditch that. Build our reserves up. Stop selling so much of our our gas to China and Japan. Stop selling so much of our resources to China and Japan and India as well. And then start using that gas. Start using the gas. All you do is start using the gas nationally. That will save investors money on energy prices. Build up the industry, use our resources, get back to car manufacturing. We used to do that for decades.
I want to say one thing here, right? It's very easy to say. It's very easy to say, let's stop selling gas to India, Japan, and China. And look, I've long advocated that Australia diversify its trade away from China, etc., because you can't trust the Chinese Communist Party, etc. But you know, this is one of the few industries where we actually earn hard currency. You know, we don't really have an exporting industry without, you know, exporting a lot of this energy.
I know. Because we destroyed our manufacturing industry. We destroyed it.
What I'm saying is, to me, what you're advocating for sounds like a recipe for chaos, because you would basically
you would wean off it. You would wean off, right? So you would slowly build the factories up while you slowly pull back how much you're exporting, like gas-wise. And then you make sure that the factories are healthy. Then you start exporting the high-ticket items from those factories overseas, and you slowly wean off the international globalism, and you slowly come back to nationalism.
What role?
Bada bing, bada boom.
What role do you see for skilled migrants in this scheme? Because I mean, if we wanted to rebuild manufacturing in Australia, surely you would think that in some industries, especially when you wanted to look at high tech, you know, manufacturing, etc. What happens if we don't have the local talent to do some of this stuff?
We're a first world nation, Drew. We just train our own people. We've got plenty of talent. We don't need any international talent at all.
Okay,
you tell me we need India to come and teach us how to make factories?
Let me say this, right? Let me say this. It's very easy to say that. It's very easy to say, yes, we're a first world developed country. But if you actually look, for example, right, at what goes into the process of manufacturing semiconductors, for example, in Taiwan, and like they're like literally at the highest level, right? Like they're at a point where nobody in the world can do what they do, because the amount, like the complexity in that process, like for example, like the lithography machines, et cetera, all this stuff that feeds into like the highest end technology, like some of this stuff, like we actually just couldn't do that. If we wanted to do semiconductors tomorrow, we couldn't do that, right? So how do we
put national focus on training up our own people to learn these things over the next 4 years? Again, like, just like we used to have free university, try and bring that back, and then put the focus on training people up to get back into manufacturing. We're extremely wealthy. We're Australia, bro. We're fucking Australia.
That's an interesting question. You were just saying that, we're in a really bad economic place. And I would actually say, yes, long-term, we are in a really bad economic place. But now you're saying suddenly we're actually wealthy enough that we could just literally cut off the entire rest of the world and just like do Australian Juche. And we're just going to build up our own semiconductor manufacturing industry. And we're just going to build up all our high tech. We'll be making television screens. We'll be making cars, everything overnight without any immigration, without any
Not overnight. No, not overnight. You wean off, but we don't need immigration to make this happen at all. Okay, you just train the people. Again, dude, how many young people do you see working in fucking cafes? How many cafes do you see all over the place? Do you think we need that many cafes? I think it'd be better if some of these cafes closed down. You took those people from the cafes and put them in university so they can learn how to make semiconductors or cool cars. And then they can go into those manufacturing industries and work there for like 40 years because there's enough room for growth where you can move around and actually get like a promotion.
Well, it sounds good. It sounds good to me. I wish we could do that.
We fucking can, Drew. We fucking can, mate. Okay. So the fucking government is getting in the way with their fucking crazy globalist policies, and then the Australian people think we're these fucking inept idiots. We need the fucking rest of the third world to help us out, getting our feet again. It's like you look at our history. We were completely self-sufficient. We were a protectionist like powerhouse. Okay, we exported like 40% of the world's gold production, dude.
But okay, here's a good comment, right? Someone points out it would take us 50 years to catch up with Korea on semiconductors, let alone Taiwan. And you're basically
maybe we don't do fucking semiconductors. Maybe just leave it to the Koreans and we'll trade them. Like that's what trade's for. It's when you don't have the resources to do certain things.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at, right? Like, so what role do you envision? Like, to what extent do you think we should be trading with the rest of the world? What type of exchange would exist?
You take stock of what resources you have in your country, and you take stock of what energy you have in your country, and you write it up and say, okay, what's the easiest thing we can like manufacture? Which used to be cars. I'm assuming cars are pretty easy to make in Australia. You make those things; they're the high-ticket items that you bring income in through, and then with the national currency, the national wealth that's building up, then you trade with we give our fucking cars to Taiwan or wherever. So not Taiwan. Where is it that's building these semiconductors?
I mean, Taiwan builds them, but like, what if they don't want to?
Yeah, Taiwan. Right? So, well then you make a good deal and you make them want. It's business, bro. You make a good deal and they'll want it. It's simple, and you trade for what you don't have. I mean, and then you get good global relations without having this globalist like parasitic relationship with these countries.
I want to point one thing out, right? Are you familiar, for example, with the recent effort that they had in America over the past 3-4 years? It started under Biden, where they had the CHIPS Act. They basically wanted to try and build up American capacity for semiconductor manufacturing. Mm-hmm. What they found they had to do in order to build up, and semiconductors, right? They're right at the cutting edge when it comes to technology. They found that they actually had to take workers from Taiwan to help set up these factories in like Arizona and stuff like that. And that's one example. Right? It was such a highly specialized and such a highly skilled profession.
But are you telling me that we don't? Are you telling me that we don't have like the resources to bring these Taiwanese people over, learn what they learn, hold on, document what they know, write it down, and then teach our own people that?
But what you were just saying before, right, is that there would be no migration whatsoever for like 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So, but would you make an exception, for example, for, I don't know, we're just talking about the issue where, America literally had to bring in the...
Okay, look, 50 Taiwanese experts coming over and training Australians how to make...
like hundreds of thousands of people, but yeah.
Well, okay, why do they need to be here? You tell me we need hundreds of thousands of people here to teach Australians how to make semiconductors?
I'm not saying
because listen, hold on. There's a big difference between getting Taiwanese people to come to Australia to build our semiconductors for us and getting these Taiwanese people to come to Australia to teach us how to make semiconductors. Okay, we want to be in this position where they will teach us how to make the semiconductors and we can do it for ourselves.
I want to respond to Mick quickly. Mick goes, Drew is literally asking questions. Lawrence answers. That's not even a debate. It's an interview more so. I mean, Lawrence can ask me questions. So far, Lawrence has...
Okay. Drew, what's an Australian? Okay. What's an Australian?
What's an Australian? Look, I think Australia was built built up by Britain. It's built up as a European Western country. I think over time, the society has changed to the extent that we say that somebody can be an Australian if they're not ethnically British, if they're not ethnically, white European, they can assimilate, they can become an Australian by adopting the values of Australia. I think that
what requirements do you need to meet to be an Australian?
I mean, look, I think that you'd have to be integrated into the culture. So, for example, you have to have a long-term, you have to be living here long-term. You have to speak English. You have to, be reasonably assimilated.
So, no, give me examples of how long you have to be here for.
Okay. Here's a good question, right? Like, Gout. Do you reckon Gout's Australian?
No, don't answer my question with a question. I need I need to understand your position. I need to understand your position. Right? What it is. I'll answer after. What do you define? What are your hard requirements? So how many years they need to be here? Minimum.
I think one, if you're born here, that's obviously a big factor. Two, living here, you've made this place your number one home. You're not living half the year overseas, right?
Okay, so no dual citizenship, right?
It depends, right? It depends because
no fucking way.
Okay, but let me give you an example, right? Would you have a problem with a British person who's got British dual citizenship with Australia? You wouldn't have that problem.
No, because we're part of the Anglo, we're all Anglo-Celtic countries.
I mean, to an extent,
Anglosphere. So we've got the same.
So you're just establishing there, right? That it's not just the concept of dual citizenship is not necessarily fatal, right? You're agreeing.
Yeah. Okay. So look, it depends. Like, do I think actually? You know what? Maybe no dual citizenship. I think maybe even dual citizenship's a bad thing. So even if they're from Britain.
Even Britain, right? Like British.
Even if they're from, I think if they want to be classified as Australian, they need to sacrifice everything else. Because again, it makes it so if this person, like you got so many people now that are talking about the fall of Australia, talking about how I'm just going to leave. And you see this shit in Ireland too. All the Irish youth, all the British youth, and like, I don't see a future in Ireland. I'm going to leave. It's like, motherfucker, fuck your country. Like, don't be a fucking bitch. Like, this is what you're meant to do with your land.
Look,
so I think dual citizenship is a bad thing.
Okay, so okay, look, I understand you, right? I had the option to do dual citizenship. I had the option to do dual citizenship with Cyprus. I actually refused to take that option, right? Because I see myself Australian. Okay, so where do you draw the line, right?
So we've got two requirements. You got to live here for a while, and And so for you believe you can have dual citizenship, but you can't have allegiances to other countries.
Yeah, look, I think actually that's probably how I would see it, right? Like, I think if somebody's here's a good example, right? Like, me personally, if you ask me, what do you think of the Green Senator Larissa Waters in Queensland? I'm not a fan, right?
Yeah.
But she technically had Canadian dual citizenship because she was born there and she lived there for 3 months when she was a baby. Like, I thought kicking her out of the parliament for that reason was retarded. And I think a lot of people would probably see that, right?
Okay, so what else? What else do you need to be an Australian? You need to be here for a while, and then what else? You need to be have your allegiance to Australia. What does that mean? Sure.
Yeah, look,
go on.
Look, I think allegiance to Australia. You view it as your primary home, and primary allegiance is to the country, and you respect the existing culture that exists in the country, and you want to assimilate into it. So that's how I see it, right?
So what does assimilation look like to you? Is it that you want to assimilate or that you have assimilated?
Okay, here's a good example, right? Rukshan. I know that a lot of really far right guys think that Rukshan, just because Rukshan has brown skin, he can't be Australian. But if you look at him, right, he's got conservative values. He doesn't want to have mass migration. He's not necessarily out there advocating for the replacement of Australia. He's not advocating for destruction of the Western values of Australia. He's not out there saying that destroy Australia. Why would Rukshan, for example, not be allowed to be Australian? I look at him and I'm like, he's fully assimilated. What's wrong with him? I see him as Australian.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a hypothetical. If I snap my fingers, Thanos snap, and all of a sudden everyone in Australia becomes a Sri Lankan like Rukshan, is it still Australia?
I think that's just a retarded question, though. I think
hypothetical. Is it still Australia? They all have the same values. They've all lived here for 10 years plus. They all have the same culture.
Okay, I'll answer.
Is it still Australia?
Right? I'll answer this back, right? if somehow in this theoretical scenario, the culture was the exact same, but everyone just had slightly darker skin. But
no, I'm talking. I mean, they're Sri Lankan. They're all Sri Lankans.
Well, I mean, if the country was culturally Sri Lankan, it would be a different country, obviously.
No, it's got the culture of Rukshan. It's like 27 million Rukshans.
Well, look, see it this way, right? If they had the exact same outlook as you, right? They see the world the exact same outlook as you. They speak English. They think the exact same way you think. They've got the same brain as you.
Yeah.
Why would it change if their skin color's slightly darker?
No. But answer the hypothetical. Yes or no? Is that still Australia? If it's a 27 million Rukshans, is it Australia? Yes or no? Yes or no?
I'm saying it wouldn't be Australia if the culture changed. If
No. I'm saying Rukshan. I'm using Rukshan as the ideal Australian, Sri Lankan.
I'm not necessarily saying that like Rukshan's the ideal Australian. I'm just giving an example.
No.
Here's one guy. I'm saying here's one guy, and he's obviously come from Sri Lanka, but he's made an effort to become an Australian, and he sees himself as Australian. He sees himself as primarily as Australian. He's not going out there, every week fucking fighting the Sri Lankan government at the embassy, etc. He sees himself as Australian.
My point is that your requirements for being an Australian don't mean anything, because you can just give those to anyone, which means it means nothing.
Let me ask you a question, right? I posted this the other day as a meme, and I actually think it had a good point, right? So you've seen that video, right, of that white British guy who's converted to Islam. He's like a ginger, and he's
Mashallah.
Dino Verdun. It's a good song, good song.
Yeah.
Now, okay, you look at that guy, right, and say compare him to Rishi Sunak, and Rishi Sunak is like ethnically, he's ethnically Indian, and he's religiously Hindu. But if you look at him culturally, right, like he has the same taste and manners as like a refined upper class British gentleman. He's gone to Oxford. He's educated. He's articulate. Sure. Like, who's more British in that scenario? Like Rishi Sunak or like the white Anglo guy who's like singing Dino Verdun? Like, I actually think Rishi Sunak is like more. He's preserved more of like the sort of like cultural inheritance of Britain in his character than that Dino Verdun guy.
Well, yeah, but I think that a nation and a people are made up by their ethnicity. So he's just a Muslim acting Brit, and that's a British acting. That's India,
right? Like, okay, here's a question for you, right? Like, okay, say Britain was 100% ethnically Anglo, right? But somehow Thanos click, it was suddenly an Islamic country. Would it still be English?
Yeah.
Would it be Britain?
Well, they'd still be English, yeah, but it would be an Islamic English country.
But would you?
But that's what I mean. I think it comes down to your race. I think culture is downstream from race. So.
Okay, but let me ask you this, right? Say Australia was a full 100% white ethno state, but Thanos click tomorrow. Everyone is a Muslim, and everyone there's mosques on every street, and it's an Islamic Australian culture. It's Islamic Australia, but everyone's white. Is it the same Australia?
No, of course not. No, we're a Christian country. So there's a cultural aspect to it that you can't, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's not just culture. It's our stock.
I'm actually agreeing with you that it's not just like culture. I agree with you there. I think, like, for example, you take a case like Rishi Sunak. At the end of the day, he's ethnically Indian, but I think I would say he's fully 100% assimilated into British culture. That's the way I see it, right?
Okay, yeah, but you can assimilate into British culture without being a Brit. Like, you're still not a Brit. You're still an Indian. It's assimilated.
I think he's British by nationality. He's ethnically Indian. So I agree. Like, you can't.
But like from your debate, bro, with Joel, the definition of the word nationality means like coming from the same place, like birth-wise, natio, like natal.
Yeah, you can say that, but clearly, like, okay, here's a fact about white people, right? A fact about Anglo culture is that Anglos by nature are like the most hyper individualistic people on the face of the planet. So, for example, great book I've got here, right? It's the weirdest people on earth. And basically the argument of this book, right, is that the psychological profile of people in Northwest Europe is really unique.
What's the book called again? Show me again.
The weirdest people in the world.
Okay.
And it's basically evolutionary psychology and history and all this stuff. And essentially the argument here is that liberalism, he's almost arguing, right, that like liberalism is almost like the state religion. It's like Shintoism of Anglo people, right? Like he's saying that like liberalism is like just something that over like 1,000 years has become almost like indigenous or like, you know, inherent to, you know, Northwest Europe. And I think if you actually look at, like, if you do surveys, if you do studies and stuff like that, you ask the average white person on the street, and they're going to be far less. So this is the meme, right? Like, for years we've been hearing about how, you know, white people are the most racist people on earth, all this shit, and that's like from the far left, etc. But if you actually look at it, if you have studies and all these things, like, you actually find that, like, survey after survey, like, Anglo white people are basically like way less tribalistic, way less, you know, way less, you know, way less predisposed to seeing the world through the lens of blood and soil, etc.
Like the least racist,
literally, like, basically the least racist. So this is what I'm bringing up for you, right? If that's something that's really inherent to, for example, English culture, and English culture over hundreds of years develops a different conception of nationality, where they say, okay, we're so against tribalism that we actually think people can absorb and assimilate into our nation. Like that is something that organically happened over. That's something that's organically happened over a long period of time.
Okay. So, okay. So a good example is
an average person on the street, and even the average conservative person would say, yeah, Rishi Sunak has like assimilated into Britain.
Sure. Okay. Well, again, a good example of this is Australia, right? Because Australia, like, explicitly defined what an Australian was when it federated, right? Had the White Australia policy, the Union Jack in the flag.
That was 1901, yes.
At the Southern, 1901, Immigration Restriction Act. So it defined explicitly what an Australian was, what its people were. And you're using the argument that if after enough time that liberal kind of like attitude seeped into the nation, that they then will change the definition.
So, someone from the comment section is trying to pull me up on, Drew, if Australia consists 100% of Rookshanks, would it still be Australia? No, it wouldn't be. I don't believe in I don't believe it's just, look, what I'm saying, right, is I like Rookshan. I think Rookshan is Australian. I think he's fully assimilated into Australian. I think people should be able to assimilate into Australia, even if they're of a different race. But I'm not fully blank slate that, like, you could just 100% have completely different ethnicity, completely different culture.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so
ridiculous.
So look, I'm not advocating for full replacement or whatever. All I'm saying is a more moderate thing. I think somebody from a different racial background, different ethnic background, if they try genuinely to assimilate into a culture and they genuinely do it in a good faith way, I think it's possible. And I see it all the time. I see people all the time who've been.
I'm not arguing that it's not possible for, like, foreigners to assimilate and integrate into society in a healthy way. I'm just saying that those foreigners, even once they assimilate, are still not technically Australian. Okay.
I mean, from an ethnic, you might say that ethnically, right?
Yeah.
So that's your conception ethnically.
Yeah.
But
yes.
But again, this comes back to that question, right? Like, if you ask the average person on the street and they're
okay. So this is the point I was getting to. So you're using the argument that if this liberal mindset seeps into the nation for long enough, that eventually the people within the nation will change their own definition of what they are. Okay. So you're saying that after enough time in Australia, for example, that the Australian people then had an enlightenment where they abandoned their old tribalism and they adopted this liberalism, which allows everyone in, and that's the new Australia because they all got enlightened, right? That's your argument.
It's not even.
Yeah.
It's much more complex than that, because this is something that's generations have changed. It's generational change, right?
Yeah, you're saying a slow seeping in of these values, right? Of liberal, individualistic values.
I'm not even saying that slow seeping in of these values. I'm just saying over time, over
genetically we're predisposed to doing this.
No, I'm not saying that. I don't think people are genetically predisposed. I'm saying over the past 120 years, there has been a cultural shift in Australia where, like, if you ask the average white person on the street.
No, but you're using evolutionary biology. So we're talking about evolution, we're talking about culture.
Oh no, if you're asking me about that book that I was just referencing, like, that's not, it's not talking about genetics. It's talking about a process of history changing over like 1,000 years.
So evolutionary psychology? Almost like sociology.
It's not
like sociology.
The argument of that book is not that it's genetics. The argument of that book is that culture influences genetics, and and that the culture that has built up over 1,000 years, and a very unique culture that has built up over 1,000 years in like sort of like northwestern Europe, is such that it is changed actually the entire worldview, like the worldview of Western educated, industrially developed people is so different to the worldview of people in other parts of the world because of like
of course.
1,000 years of historical change and cultural change.
Sure. Okay, well, let me ask you this: who defines what a nation is made up of?
I would say that the people of that nation define it.
Okay, so in Australia, for example, we were basically always against mass immigration, but it was imposed upon us with the populate or perish motto after we got bombed in Darwin by the Japanese. So it was basically imposed upon us as a people by the government. It continued to be imposed upon us by the government. In the 90s, about 90% of Australians were against mass immigration. And despite all that, the national, the compass kept moving towards this multicultural fantasy, this cult, where they then changed the definition of what an Australian is against the will of the people. So is that right?
That's where I disagree with you. Right? Because I don't think it's as simple as just saying, oh, the government imposed this over the top of people, right? Because look at here's a good example, right?
They did. They brought in the Anti-Discrimination Act, which meant that you couldn't actually stand up.
Right? My counter example to that, right, is you've got the famous referendum in the 60s on and it's typically seen by people as, the vote on whether Indigenous people should get the vote. It was more complex than that. It was actually, that referendum was actually more about whether the federal government should have the power to, make laws for Indigenous people. But the way it was sold to the people, right, the way that is popularly remembered in the Australian imagination and culturally remembered is that, like, this was the vote where Australians all came together and essentially said, Indigenous people are part of the nation. And that was like 90% plus, right? So that was 90% plus. So
part of the nation, but are they Australian?
I mean, there was 90%.
That's the question.
Look, there was
but it wasn't like it wasn't an identity question of like, are we the exact same? Everyone knows, even into the 70s, 60s, and 80s, that Aboriginals weren't the same as us. Okay, but what happened in that those kind of votes is that we accepted them into our society, into the actual society. We said we're going to try and integrate them, just try and live in harmony, which of course most Australians wanted. I don't think we ever really had beef with the Indigenous people. It just took a couple of decades for the Indigenous people to catch on to what we were doing.
My point wasn't that that was the point at which there was, like the reason I bring that up, right, is I'm saying here's an example where there was an overwhelming majority of the Australian people, like 90% plus, who basically signed on to a more progressive conception of, citizenship, nationhood, etc.
Sure. So what was the vote to allow Aboriginals to become Australian citizens?
That wasn't actually the vote. Like, if you study it as a law student, they basically tell you that's not actually what it was about. But if you ask the average person on the street, what was that referendum in the 60s? And everyone basically says, well, it was Aboriginal citizenship. So that's how people see it in the culture. And that's how a lot of people understood it, I guess, when they were voting. Was. So my point in breaking...
But again, citizenship doesn't mean nationality. Right, to me. Like, just a piece of paper doesn't make you an Australian. If I go and manage to get a Japanese citizenship, I'm not Japanese. Okay, so
not necessarily. I mean, you wouldn't be ethnically Japanese. I agree with you. You wouldn't be ethnically Japanese.
Yeah, and I believe that Australians are an ethnicity.
I was going to say, right, on the subject of Japanese, because obviously Japan has a much more like restricted definition of who can be a citizen, who's Japanese. I think somebody who's not ethnically Japanese, like a white person, right, if they went to Japan, they learned the language, they lived in Japan for like 50, 60 years, eventually they would be probably accepted as Japanese.
They're not. No, dude, that's a meme, dude.
Not ethnically, but they would be probably culturally accepted as Japanese.
No, never. No. The Japanese it's a meme, dude. This is a meme because the Japanese will say to people that have lived there for 10 years, you will never be Japanese.
10 years, yes. I'm talking about somebody who
I'm talking plus. I'm talking about plus. Like, it's like they are super blood focused in Japan. If you have like a mixed kid as a Japanese girl, they will even say that your kid is not Japanese. They are super, super hyper focused on this kind of stuff. I swear.
Look, that's actually fair. Okay, that's fair. Okay.
Japan is the worst example to use for that because they are explicitly anti-foreigner.
Look, the Japanese. Okay, what I probably should have said, right, is in my conception.
Yeah.
If you're asking me, and I guess I've got more of like the Western mindset when it comes to this stuff. If you're asking me, somebody could become Japanese from my perspective as a Westerner, right? I get.
Yeah, I think it's nonsense. I also think, like, we're talking about the national identity. Again, we never consented to having all these people come over and change our identity, and then start to use our own identity against us, and have them tell me that no, they're an Australian, and if I reject that, then I'm not an Australian. Like, we never signed up for that. We signed up for this myth of assimilation, which never happened. There's meant to be this long-winded thing, like, 50 years down the track, they'll be like assimilated to us. Instead, we got fucking Parramatta, Lakemba. So
here's the question, right? Here's the question: if you're saying, okay, the overwhelming majority of Australians were never consulted and oppose it, then why is it the case that if you I challenge you, right? If you go down into the CBD of any major city and you just ask somebody, can a black person be Australian? I bet like 90% plus of whites you ask on the street would say yes, they can be.
Yeah, well, I think we're stupid. I think most Australians have become so stupid that
you're against the overwhelming majority of other white people when it comes to this question of nationhood.
No, I'd say the majority would agree that an actual Australian is a white person.
Sorry, say that again.
Majority of Australia would say no. To be Australian, you have to be white. Like, if you're an actual Aussie, dude, this is where the whole meme. Oh, Drew, this is where the meme of Spot. Drew, pause. This is where the meme of Spot the Aussie came from. Okay, we were never taught this game as a kid. But everyone, even younger generations now, I keep kids in my TikTok comments going, "Spot the Aussie," because it's a meme of going into the city and knowing, oh, there's no Australians here anymore because we've been ethnically replaced in these places. And we know, oh, what are you looking for when you spot an Aussie? You looking for the black guy, the Indian? No, you're looking for a white, blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy. Okay.
I still think, though, if you asked the majority of Australians, they would say that it's not solely limited to race, the question of identity of Australian.
But that's just your opinion. I disagree. I think they would agree that it isn't ethnic.
Okay.
That's why we're all rage. Everyone's to go to a country town and ask them what they think of Parramatta. They'll say there's too many Chinese. They don't say, oh, there's too many Australians there in one place. They say there's too many Chinese there. Ask them what they think of Lakemba. They don't say, oh, it's too many Australians. They say there's too many Muslims there. They know that there's a clear difference between us and them. It takes a toddler to pick it out. Take a toddler into Parramatta and he'll tell you what the fuck. Where am I? How'd you get to China so quick?
Okay, so let's ask this, right? If these people can never be Australian, what's the solution?
Well, like I said, I think we need to get rid of the students, get rid of the temps, close the border, have a massive. Let me answer your question, and then we need to have a massive national conversation about this issue, about identity, about history, about history, about heritage, about our previous policies, about hold on, let me finish. About the previous intentions of our prime ministers who built this country. We need to understand what is our country actually built on.
Okay, here's the question, right? Why is it the case that just you can have surveys after survey, poll after poll, election after election, like your politics aren't popular in Australia?
No, they are. They're growing so quickly. No. The right.
It's not the prime minister.
Pauline Hanson?
Yeah.
She's a pathetic leader, bro. She's not even strong enough. I'm talking because no, she's abandoned the like ethno-nationalist stance. Like she's not. She like just like says that any people can be Australian.
Why is there not a like a ethno-nationalist government in power if supposedly the vast majority of Australians agree with you?
Because it's been a suppressed issue, bro. Like there's that quote, I think it's Menzies who said, might be Menzies or Hawke maybe, who said that the government has an implicit deal to just not talk about mass immigration. So it's not these topics, right?
At the end of the day, the vast majority of white people, the vast majority of white Australians, if you ask them, they are going to say that somebody can assimilate into the country, even if they're not.
I agree. I wouldn't say vast majority. I'd say it depends where you are. I'd say that I'm from the country.
It is the vast majority.
No. So I would not say it's the vast majority. Okay, because for example.
But even as early as
listen, because here's the thing. I think those
Australians should be included in the country, sort of thing.
Included in the country doesn't mean that we're the same ethnicity.
Yeah,
they never thought that. It's a ridiculous idea.
My whole point, right, is if you ask the majority of Australians, it's not just ethnicity when it comes to determining Australian. Like arguably,
Okay. Cool. Okay. Well, I'll use a different argument. Okay.
White people are historically like the least tribalistic societies on earth, right?
Yeah, I
Anglos
know.
are historically the least tribalistic society, and it actually has evolved over history that honestly, the majority of people, white Australians, Anglos, etc., don't think that it is just solely a blood and soil question. Like they
Okay.
think
Well,
that
let me. I know what you're saying. Okay. Let me ask you a question. For an American, for example, if you went let's say hypothetically, you went to most Americans and you asked them about gun control, and you said, "Is owning a gun part of being an American, or is the right to own a gun part of being an American?" And majority of those people said no. Would that mean that owning a gun isn't part of being an American?
like it's not as simple as like a 51%,
Okay.
49% thing.
No, here's the reason I'm asking this, right? Here's the reason I'm asking this is because when the founding fathers founded America, they had a clear vision of what America was going to be and what the country was going to be, what the people were going to be. And they wrote these things down and they put it into paper and they founded America. They founded the concept of America. Okay, so you had to fit these guidelines. So yes, owning a gun and having the right to own a gun is integral to being an American. And in the same regard, in the same kind of train of thought, with the White Australia policy being the first policy the Australian government introduced, with the dictation test being one of the first things they brought into being when they federated, there is a clear definition that the founding fathers of this country had for what an Australian was.
I know.
And just because we've gone through this like the 70s, this progressive period where people have had their mindset shifted, they've been robbed of a proper education, they've been robbed of any kind of like opposing worldview. You only get a left-wing education now. So just because these people that haven't got a proper education, that don't know their history, just because they're saying that an Australian can be anyone, doesn't mean that hold on. It doesn't mean that fits the definition of what an Australian originally was.
But here's the thing, right? No nation, no society is ever static in history. Never. You can't just say
But an identity is formed by its creator. Okay, so the identity of Australia was formed by the founding fathers who came up with that concept. You're then bastardizing that creation.
It's not necessarily bastardizing though, because if you have just pure stasis, right? That's a recipe for just stagnation and decline. If you can never
no, it's not. We were the most prosperous when we had the White Australia policy. We started our decline when we opened up to the global market.
That's not necessarily true. Like, dude, in the 60s, like there were like still millions of people in Australia in the 60s didn't have like storage in their households. Like we were still quite poor by like today's standards.
I mean, as far as like developing countries go, as far as getting our infrastructure and resources out to the country and out to the bush, we're doing pretty damn good compared to the world. I mean, we weren't struggling. This is the classic, forget his name, the American Renaissance argument. He's like, you're making the argument that we were drowning on our own homogeneity. Because we were just so white and we were so.
I'm not necessarily saying it. And someone goes, "Oh, Drew, is Israel a stagnant society?" I'm not necessarily saying that it's a bad thing to have like a cultural majority, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if you are just saying that Australia should have been 99.9% white for the rest of time, like how do you have a society like at the end of the day, like that's the same mindset that like Pakistani peasants have, right? That like it should just be the tribe, the blood, the kin, and just no change for like that's the same mindset as like the Yemeni Houthis, right? At the end of the day, like it's not.
But it depends.
To, like the Western modern worldview.
No, but it depends whether or not these things are being enforced with force or with consent. And the thing with Australia is that it was consent that was keeping these things enforced. Everyone loved the White Australia policy. It was widely accepted. When they started bringing in Brits, people were criticizing it because I was saying we don't even want Brits here because we want to just be Australia.
I think this is like it was. I'm not saying that it wasn't. It was popular when it was first instituted in like 1900s.
It was popular throughout its history.
So the first half of the 20th century, I would actually agree, and this is actually would be mainstream view of all Australian historians, even left-wing historians, was that white Australia was very important to Australia in the first half of the 20th century. Clearly, there were massive shifts in history in the 20th century. We did face an invasion. We faced an invasion. Populate or perish was a genuine thing.
Yes.
It was a genuine historical thing that happened. And that's just one example. That's one example, right, of an outside shock that does lead to culture changing inside the country. So that's my point, right?
No,
Like, you
okay,
can't
no.
ever have a
That's not.
fully static.
There's not a direct correlation between getting bombed in Darwin and then changing the definition of Australian to fit Japanese
Actually,
and
there
Indians.
actually is, in general terms, yes, because even okay,
Okay.
I'll explain. This is a good point. This is a good point.
Okay.
So the first half of the 20th century, Southern Europeans, the Wogs, right? In the first half of the 20th century, they weren't actually going to be considered part
Wait,
of.
are you a Wog?
Well, I'm Greek Cypriot, so yes, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, I'm Southern European, right? I'm Southern European.
Yeah, I'm joking.
So look, funny, right? The first half of the 20th century, right? Like people like me weren't considered white. The funny thing is that today I got all these leftists who would say, like, for example, okay, here's a good example, right? When I was starting my protest against the Chinese government at the University of Queensland, I got all these far left people who hated me, all these agitators going, Drew's a white supremacist, Drew's a white nationalist, Drew's doing this for white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. So all these people had defined me as white, by the second decade of the 21st century. But 70 years ago, 80 years ago, I wouldn't have been considered white in Australia. And some Europeans weren't considered white. One thing that did change was that there was the risk to Australia in World War II, the threat of invasion by Japan. That forced the government and the society to decide to broaden the concept of, who could be Australian to not just Northern Europeans.
No. Okay, but it wasn't the society; it was the government that decided that for the society. And the society. No. There's massive pushback. Drew, even when the 10-pound bombs were coming over, they were getting bullied by Australians. We were that protectionist.
It's hard to say that there's no societal buy-in whatsoever. Because, like, if you think of it today, right, things like the Snowy Hydro project that brought out all these Southern Europeans, that's remembered in very fond terms within the national memory, right? So
I mean, it depends who you ask. It depends who you ask. You ask the people that live in Sydney, they'd be like, "Oh, the gangs that came, the Italian gang, the crime gangs."
I get that if you ask Joel Davis, he's going to say that's bad. But if you ask,
I'm saying if you ask people that grew up in Sydney during that time, they'd probably say, "Oh yeah, the gangs that came with that, the violence and the crime that came with that, probably wasn't a good thing."
I think overall, like Southern European.
No, it was so worth it, dude. No, we got the Snowy Hydro. We got Snowy Hydro. We got Underbelly from that. We got heaps of all these like.
Come on. We never really had a huge mafia. It's never as bad as like America. It's true.
No, but still, there were problems that it brought. It did bring ethnic conflicts.
I mean,
but no. Okay, here's a point I want to get. Someone commented down here, right? Bastardization of that creation. His point was that that's how culture changes, right? But no, after a certain point, if you bastardize the concept enough, it loses its meaning. It gets too far away from what the actual concept was.
So, but this is this is the problem, right? Like the rest of society can agree, and there'll be massive. This is the problem, right? We're talking about shifts that have taken place over more than 125 years, and then you're just saying, well, anybody who doesn't agree with the view that I have right now, they're just mistaken. They've been educated wrong. But
and
that's your view, right? But it's still an organic shift that has happened in the population over decades.
It's not organic. No, it's not organic. It's completely unorganic.
Jews, blah blah blah.
No, I know. It's I mean, we can talk about the Jews if you want to talk about if you want to get banned, Drew. You can't talk about that. No. I mean, it's not just them. It's globalist interests that are just working to. It was the globalist motto post World War II, and I mean, there was a big influence with the Jews involved with it, with criticizing nationalism, and the multicultural stuff was pushed a lot by Jewish lobbying groups. But dude, all this started happening.
Australian Jews today on migration, it'd be 90% shut the border. So I think
but I'm talking about the cultural shifts that were happening, like the civil rights movement, that kind of stuff. The Mabo case, there were Jewish lawyers involved with the Mabo case. The Jewish Australian Society brags about their involvement in the Mabo case.
Let me ask you this, right? Why is it the case? So if Australia was fully homogenous, right? If Australia was fully homogenous, white Australia, and you had the cohesive society and stuff like that, why is it that in your worldview, right, this all changed because of just a small couple Jewish lobby groups? Why is that the case? Why do they have this magical power to just turn everybody against their own? Why is that the case in your worldview? Because
I think there was. If
the population is 99% non-Jewish, why would it be the case that just two Jewish lobby groups, which just magically shift the entire.
No. It's not the lobbying groups. It's the intellectuals. It's the business elites. It's the banking elites. It's the heads of all the international companies. No, because you had like this. Like we're talking about postmodernism. We're talking about like Frankfurt School. We're talking about all these kind of things post World War II, which started getting adopted in Europe.
The Frankfurt School is why we have mass immigration.
No, but I'm talking about I've
got a book by Adorno here, right? The Dialectic of Enlightenment.
No.
That's Frankfurt School.
But you understand,
that meant that I've just been the magical Jew has swindled me. I don't understand.
No, but you understand like Marxist and like postmodern thinking, right?
Sure.
Somewhat. Okay, so postmodern thinking is all about getting rid of boundaries, getting rid of definitions. We talk about like Herbert Marcuse, these kind of people. The entire crux of no. There were lots of Jewish intellectuals.
Thousands of people.
There were lots of Jewish intellectuals involved in postmodernism. They weren't all Jewish. I'm not saying every single person that pushed this needle over here was 100% Jewish. There were lots of different people who weren't Jewish but were involved in it. But I'm saying that there were lots of prominent Jewish intellectuals, and it just so happens that there is a lot of wealth within the Jewish community, and there's a lot of insular ethnocentrism within the Jewish community. So when these intellectuals start publishing their work, they usually got picked up pretty quickly by like Time magazine and these sorts of things, which then put them into the spotlight. And you got like Hollywood, which is basically completely Jewish, which then helps to perpetuate that, etc., etc.
We've got a comment here by this.
Yeah, we're going.
He's like,
we're going to the JQ.
It's the tiny elite which includes you. Like this is just this is the problem, right? That's an ideology of like learned helplessness, right? Like you see the world the same way that like I don't know, Ibrahim Kendi sees the world, right? Where like all the problems are just this one ethnic group that have done everything bad to me. And I think
it's not. But okay, no. It just so happens that they keep popping up when you start looking into it. For example, like I can't remember the name. But there's a Jewish property developer who's talking about how we need more mass migration in Australia right now because he's building high rises that he can't build quick enough.
Like he's not because of him that we have mass migration in Australia though. Like
no. Again, we want to go back to postmodernism, right? The whole crux of that during the 60s, like 40s to 70s, when postmodernism was being adopted, when all this kind of like, communism was kind of spreading, all this kind of stuff. Postmodernism teaches to abandon boundaries, to abandon definitions, to abandon definitions of things, because then you kind of open yourself up and you get freer and freer. That kind of ideology goes against nationalism directly. Okay. So hold on. So as this was getting picked up, though, that was diluting national identity, and then national identity was started being seen as something as a relic, and then the boomers, the older generation, couldn't keep up with the intellectuals, the young intellectuals, so they just kind of surrendered and said like, "Oh, we don't know. We just follow Christian. We just go to church. We don't know what we're talking about." And then the intellectuals started running the show.
I think this is an ideology of learned helplessness. Like in your worldview, right? You have a 99% plus white Australian ethno state, and suddenly like less than 1% of the population is Jewish, and then they just suddenly somehow. I'm not
blaming or just the Jews for this. I'm not blaming just the Jews for this.
Okay.
I don't blame. Okay. Talk about there were certain politicians. I don't know if they had links. No, I'm not blaming the Jews for this. Point like just simple, okay. But there were lots of but there were politicians whispering in our politicians' ears, like this plan I got here. What's it called? The button plan, for example, right? Where politicians get these like advisors whispering into our politicians' ears, saying like, "Oh, the future is like globalism. The future is the Asian market. We need to open up to the Asian market because that's where all the capital is coming from now," and like all this kind of bullshit. And then just swayed our politicians. And I don't know how many of those people were Jewish or how many of those people had connections to Jews.
Getting into pretty retarded territory because like we are, at the end of the day, the country is situated in the Asia Pacific, and we've had the large. It is literally the biggest economic growth in human history has taken place in the last 50 years in the Asia Pacific. So of course there would be a lot of trade with the Asia Pacific if we're just sitting there.
No, but it's not just trade. It's about we sold our manufacturing offshore. That's what I'm talking about with this button plan. We sold our car manufacturing industry to Japan. We destroyed our own manufacturing industry.
So okay, here's a question, right? We've got a comment by Nicholas, and he goes, "There's plenty of examples of voters rejecting ideas elites are attempting to push. If the public are so opposed to multiculturalism, it would have been an election issue." And here's an example, right? Like elites were trying to, like you would definitely
It is an election issue. The thing is the government doesn't want to talk about it.
Okay, but let me ask you this, right? If you just saw American election, and obviously for a long time, there was like a sort of push within academia and the intelligentsia in favor of, gender fluidity and all this sort of stuff. And it was clearly just completely destroyed at the ballot box. That's one example that was just complete. So why is it that gender fluidity and all that stuff can be defeated at the ballot box, but in your worldview, multiculturalism can't be defeated at the ballot box? It's just like, it's just this grand occupation or whatever.
Well, we're not getting, if the government actually like put like a referendum or whatever, or just like a national vote to try and, to set in stone the migration rate we're going to have over the next couple of years. And they said, do you want 0 for 5 years? I think majority of Australians would vote for that. But the thing is, like, for example, Dutton, there's so much talk about the fact that Dutton could have had this election in the bag if he just said, oh, we're going to like close the border. We're going to go to like, subpar 50,000 migrants. But instead he said what, 25%? He said such a weak policy. It turned everyone off him. And then everyone's going for Rennick now. So no, we've wanted less immigration since the 90s. Yeah, vote one Rennick. But no.
So this
dude,
right?
the polls from the 90s said that 90.
Edit. Imagine Peter Dunning comes out, he does an Agartha edit, he goes, preserve your grill. He says, preserve your grill. He does like the fucking edits with the, Hyperborea and stuff like that. And he says, we're going to close the border.
Yeah.
We'd win.
Yeah. I mean, Labor, dude, we've still got like a boomer voting blocks. Like the boomers still kind of rule the show. But I'm talking about coming in the coming years.
A lot of like a major section of white Australian society doesn't agree with your solely blood and soil view.
No. Look, I think most of the older generations of Australians sort of agree with me. They don't. Most of the older generation Australians still believe in the myth of assimilation. Okay, so what they think is happening is, oh no, we're bringing too many in too quick, and we're putting it in one place too quickly. So then they're just not assimilating. And in their eyes, it's like, no, if we just like,
I think, like, here's an example, right? If I had gone to a Greek school with 1,000 other Greek people only speaking Greek, I wouldn't have been able to assimilate into Australian culture. So I think it's actually true.
Sure, no, but the boomers ignore the fact that if you bring in a large enough diaspora, that at a certain point they lose the incentive to assimilate.
And I actually agree on that. I actually agree with that. Which is why I'm saying we should have lower migration. So
no, but
I know a lot of people in your side of politics like think, oh, Drew is this fucking like evil Jewish plot, far left communist who wants to destroy Australia. Like, no, I'm actually saying we should have a lower Australia. I mean, we should have a lower migration. I think we should have. I do want Australia to remain like a sort of like overall Western country. My take is just that if a black person assimilates into Australian culture, they can be Australian. That's where we disagree. Like, I think.
Well, yeah, we disagree on identity. But what about the demographic issue? Like, do you think that Australia should remain? What do you think Australia should remain a certain percent white?
I actually think that we should have a system. Like, we should look at, for example, what Singapore does, where they keep demographics stable. So Singapore was like, okay, here's our demographics at like the foundation of our society. We don't want to have massive shifts in demographics because it will cause social conflict and I don't want to see, crazy Nazis come to power and stuff like that. So I think we should just have a stable demographic situation. That's how.
What does that mean, though? What does that mean? What does it look like?
I think the existing demographics of Australia, we should keep it at that. I don't want Australia to be completely changed.
What's like percentage-wise, number-wise? Like, what are you talking about? Like, 30% of people in Australia were born overseas. So you want to keep that the same way for the next 10 years? You want to maintain the 30%?
Not necessarily, but like obviously we don't. Obviously, like if somebody's born in New Zealand or Britain or whatever, like they're very culturally compatible, so it's not necessarily a problem, right? Like,
sure.
I'm saying
talking about what's your ought statement for the demographic makeup of Australia? What's your ought statement for the demographic makeup of Australia?
I want Australia to remain an Australian. I want Australia to remain for Australians. I want Australia to have the existing. I want the existing demographic balances of society to exist. I don't want a situation where in 50 years this country.
But the problem is the balance, right? Like here's the thing with multiculturalism is you need state enforcement to keep that going, because when you get these diasporas that come into our cities, listen, let me fucking point. Here's the thing: when these fucking diasporas get in, they start advocating for their own ethnic interests. They don't say, oh, we're cool with this balance. We're cool with the 10%, 90% balance. They say, no, we want more power. The will to power comes out in these groups, and they start advocating for that.
I mean, that's your. I mean, you can argue that. I think
that's just human nature, bro. What are you talking about? You've got like Lakemba at the moment, the Muslims out there looking to do the Aram or whatever it is, Aman, every Friday now because they've got like 67% majority in Lakemba.
Well, look, I don't agree with ethnic enclaves like Lakemba. Like that's not a
But the only way to avoid the ethnic enclaves is to restrict the percentage of foreigners in the country.
I think that we should have a majority of migration coming from, countries that are culturally compatible to Australia.
I'm not talking about people coming in. I'm talking about the people here. You need to set an ought statement for what the demographic makeup is. For example, I was talking to Mick the other night. He was saying that if a certain area gets over if the global national population gets above like 3% foreigners, they start advocating for their own issues.
Someone's saying Drew's brown and he's advocating for his own interests of a less white Australia. I'm actually explicitly saying I don't want Australia to be fully culturally changed and fully demographically changed. I want it to stay the same as it is now. I want it to be the same.
Yeah, but you want your cake and you want to eat it.
What I'm saying, right, is when I'm old, I want Australia to still have the Anzac Day traditions. I want Australia to still be recognizably the Australia that I grew up in. I don't want it to be.
Yeah.
I don't your question before where you're like, oh, Drew, would you be happy if Australia was like just for randomly like 99% Sri Lankan? That's not what.
I said 9% Rukshan.
I mean, when I brought up the issue of Rukshan, when I brought up the issue of Rukshan, I was saying one individual guy. Like I'm not talking.
I know. But again, you're still ignoring the demographic issue though, because you're saying that like.
I wanted to point out here though, right? My stance on demographics and stuff like that and culture is actually a more conservative stance. I don't want to radically change Australia. I'm actually saying I want to have things stabilized. Obviously, at the moment, there's massive change in demographics and culture and stuff like that. I want to stabilize things. I don't want to.
Yeah, but you're delusional in your definition of what stability looks like. You can't have a stable society if you've got 10% of them being Muslim and 10% of them being fucking Sikhs. Like they're going to start advocating for their own interests. You're going to start having ethnic conflicts.
No, I don't think there's anything.
How's that going to stay stable?
Let me say this, right? I don't think there's anything inherent. I don't believe in religious bans. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with somebody based on religion. It's whether they are able to assimilate to the broader society, right? So I know, for example, Muslims who fully reject hardcore jihadism and hardcore all this horrible shit. As long as they fully reject it, I'm fine with that, right? But
here's what happens, right? I was saying this in my space the other night where I was saying this. When you start going down that train of thought of like, oh, the Muslim just has to, avoid the extremism and he has to kind of just adopt our culture in Australia right now. The culture you're talking about that this Muslim has to adopt is just like a secular, materialist, consumerist culture. It's not actually, hold on, pause. It's not actually the British culture that built this country. We've kind of lost touch with that over the past couple of decades. So what's happening is, as Australians, we can't go back to our roots as a British culture or Australian culture. We can't go back to our roots and start emphasizing those things explicitly because now we're surrounded by ethnic groups who, if we start doing that, would then feel like outsiders. And then because of that, they'd start advocating more strongly for their own ethnic identities. So we had to dilute our own Australian identity and they had to dilute their Muslim identity just so we can fit in and be consumers and materialists and get along.
It's not just about being consumers and materialistic and you can't have any culture. I mean, like, how do you...
These are the values you're talking about. You're just being nice, go to the shops, just, smile and wave, get your groceries, go home.
That's not what I'm saying.
But in Australia, we used to have like massive Catholic ceremonies in Sydney where everyone would come out and you'd all... But I'm saying that you're going to start having... You're saying that the Muslims in Sydney, in Lakemba, would be okay with you doing a Catholic parade that went through Lakemba? Would they be okay with that?
Oh, clearly not. They wouldn't be.
Okay, why wouldn't they be okay with that if they've all assimilated?
Because, I actually said earlier that the problem is that when you have cultural enclaves like Lakemba, there's no assimilation. So I'm actually saying that's a bad example of sectarianism.
So how do we deal with Lakemba?
It's a hard thing. I think anybody who has extremist views, jihadist views, anybody who advocates the overthrow of Australian democracy and constitution stuff, like they should be deported.
Okay, and then what? What do you do with the ethnic enclave that's formed there already?
I think you've got to try and have policies against the creation of like fucking ghettos and enclaves and stuff like that. We'll have to have really strong emphasis on assimilation and
what does assimilation mean? What are you trying to advocate for them assimilating to?
Look, it's a tough thing because I agree Lakemba is a disaster. Because it's sectarian and it's the thing is like see, I don't like ethno-nationalism, whether it's white ethno-nationalism or like Muslim ethno-nationalism, all this stuff, right? Whether it's Islamists like blood and soil politics or white blood and soil politics, I just don't like blood and soil politics, right? So my problem with but is that they have like there is a very strong sectarian sort of tendency, and look, I don't necessarily have all the solutions there. I think it's
so your solution, your solution is just become a bug man, just become like a neutral apathetic, just become a bug man, just become a neutral apathetic consumer. Don't focus on your identity, don't focus on your culture, don't focus on that. We just need to just like
you can't just go like if you just say like, oh, my solution is to go into Lakemba and fucking blow everything out. Like that's fucking psycho. Like I'm not gonna fucking.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the problem is.
Like, what's the solution?
Well, no. I what's the solution with Lakemba besides like basically just like deporting them all? Honestly, I don't know because listen. Look, because what are you gonna do? You're gonna go up there and say, hey, Lakemba, you know how you're all Muslims and you love like being like Muslims. Yeah, you can't do that anymore. You've got to be more secular. And I know you guys don't like usury, and you don't like debt, you don't like money, and you think all this is like pointless, and you're just going for heaven. But yeah, we want you to become more secular, more materialist. So you've got that option, or you can say, oh, Muslims, listen here. Or you can say, Muslims, listen here. We're a Christian country, mate. Okay, we've got the Southern Cross, we've got the Union Jack. We're a Christian country, so you need to abandon your Muslim culture to become Christian. So what's one of the two? Otherwise, they're staying Muslim.
Let me say, right, I've got no problem with somebody being a Muslim in Australia. I've got no problem with people practicing their faith.
But this is
we're trying to enforce it on society at large.
Well, that's what I do. That's what you get in Islam when you get the numbers growing to a certain extent.
Not all the time.
What are you talking? That's just human nature. Tribalism is human nature.
Singapore has some very strict policies against,
yes, and it has to be enforced by the state. It's not a natural occurrence for people to restrict their own will to power. It has to be enforced by the state to restrict that kind of stuff. Well, that's why we have like anti-discrimination laws.
Do you really think it would be a fucking good society if everyone just had like BAP, Nietzsche, will to power, just go out and fucking make your own morality? That would be retarded. Every state has to enforce some level of morality, right?
I know. But I'm saying when you bring all these ethnic groups into relation with each other, when they get to a certain diaspora, a certain number, that will to power comes out within the group and they start competing with the other groups.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there's lots of groups that just like fully assimilate into Australian culture and just there's no problems with it. Like what if
which group?
Vietnamese Australians, like we all fucking love banh mi. We all fucking love it's true though. It's fucking true.
When do you go and do you go to church with your Vietnamese friends? Do you go like a barbecue with your Vietnamese friends?
I literally do have some Vietnamese Christian friends, and like they're fully Australian, and like Vietnamese Australians, I think are that's a good example of people like fucking anti-communist. They're anti-communist. Okay. They're often conservative and family value oriented. I don't understand what's wrong with, for example, like Vietnamese Australians. I think there's lots.
Okay, look. The Vietnamese probably aren't going to like kind of band up and then ban women from wearing mini dresses. Okay, the Vietnamese are pretty chill. The Japanese are probably pretty chill too. I don't want them to have ethnic enclaves still. Okay, but we're talking about.
I don't want ethnic enclaves.
But these cultures aren't equal. The Vietnamese and the Middle Easterners aren't the same culture. They have very different values. They're very, Middle Eastern culture, like Islam, is a lot more forceful.
Like you get some of these guys, like for example, I saw like Elijah Schaffer the other day going like, the problem is not Islam, the problem is like India, and like they seem to just like only ever talk about like Indians or whatever. I don't like even within like I don't see any problem with like the vast majority of Indian Australians are just chill. Like the only, honestly, if I look at Australia, I think when it comes to the problem of assimilation, I honestly think the major problem is just when it comes to like hardcore Islamism. Like that's
Yeah, I
and
mean, look, no. India is bad too, bro. Because what happens is, right? Yeah, they're chill. Okay, they're chill. What does that mean? They're chill. It means they blend in. It means like what I was saying. They smile, they nod, they
blending is
clean their
good. I
clothes.
want people to
Hold
smile.
on,
I
no,
want
it's not good. It's not. No, it's not good because they're not actually expressing who they are. They're not actually living their life to the fullest. They're not actually fully expressing themselves, and they can only do that once they get a large enough diaspora surrounding them, which we're starting to see with like things like holy festivals coming out in Parramatta. Okay, and the
Okay,
thing is, it
I've been
happens
to a
is
Holly. Let
like
me
I
say,
said,
right?
as the
Like, I've been to
diaspora,
a Holly festival before. Like, I don't see what the fucking problem with the Holly festival is. Like, it's just chill. Like,
because it's not our fucking culture, and what it does is it reinforces their ethnic enclaves and their ethnic
not
identity, which
necessarily.
is separate from us. It
Honestly,
does.
if you look at India probably has like the most chill conception of like when it comes to Hinduism, like they've incorporated Buddha as a Hindu god.
No, bro. No, you want to talk about Hinduism? Hinduism is not a good religion, bro. Do you know about like the caste
I'm not
system?
saying. What do you say?
The caste system?
Dude, I'm not advocating the caste system, and I'm not like a
No,
Hindu.
but
I'm
what about
myself.
what about dowry?
I'm just saying, like I don't see Hindu Australians going out and carrying out terror attacks. It's chill. Like it's a pretty chill system.
Well, terrorism is a very unique thing to Muslims, bro. Okay, that's a bit of a
Like I don't know. Like there's a comment here by Nicholas, and he goes, "What's wrong with people celebrating Holi in Parramatta?" Like, look, when I see that,
because
that's
like I said, it reinforces ethnic enclaves and people
not necessarily, not necessarily.
ethnically separating them. It does. What are you talking about? If you allow a publicly celebrated festival, which is completely foreign to our nation, you're reinforcing their ability to divide themselves and isolate themselves from the rest of the country. Dude, I was just reading. I did a thread. Okay, on Sikhs just today, because I saw
In my view, Sikhs are pretty chill.
Oh, let me answer that. No, but like I did a thread on Sikhs today, and I went and dove into the Sikh Australian community, whatever, one of these things. And what it was a community that was basically aimed at integrating Sikhs into Anzac services, right? And what it did was it mentioned Anzacs, and then just goes on about how Sikhs need this umbrella kind of organization to advocate for Sikh issues, and that when they get to their ideal scenario, they will have advocates that will go to these Sikh communities and then tell the families what's happening between them and the government bodies and the rest of Australia. So they're explicitly saying in this kind of document that they're going to keep the Sikh community isolated, and the only people that are going to be able to translate between the Sikh community and the wider Australian community are going to be these selected like advocates. Okay, so you got explicit multicultural groups who
Let me
are
say this right.
implementing plans to keep themselves divided from the rest of Australia.
Can I say this right? Okay, this is something that actually changes naturally over time. So when you have multicultural groups come to Australia, they're often like retarded, self-appointed guys. No one even understands who appointed them. Like they'll just decide, oh, I'm the fucking community leader. Everyone bow to me. Every politician has to fucking meet me. And then for some reason, a lot of politicians in Australia like are retarded, and they'll be like, oh, this guy somehow is the community leader that I will just like shake hands with and take photos. That is a retarded conception of multiculturalism, right? But over time, right, you look at the Greek community. No one does that in the Greek community anymore. Like, no one gives a fuck. Like, if I just went out and just like, I'm the fucking leader of the Greek community, every politician has to meet with me. Every other Greek would be like, what the fuck? Like, no one cares. So I just think it naturally changes over time. Like maybe when people first migrate to Australia, there's kind of like, you know, there are these groups that form the multicultural associations and stuff like that. And sometimes you get like, you know, bad people in these groups who decide like, I'm going to try use it for my own personal power because I want to get photos of politicians and make myself feel really powerful, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but dude,
naturally just like I think people just naturally like move away from that and just assimilate into the broader society over time.
No, they don't assimilate into the broader society. What they do is they come out. What they do, I don't know. What they do is no. Let me reply. What they do is they come out of their suburbs where it's just one ethnicity, which is their culture, which is Indians. They come out. They come to the city. They make their money. They come back, and then they practice their own culture in their own homes, surrounded by their own people.
Let me ask you this, right? If you look at like Tammany Hall in fucking New York City in American history, you used to have like fully like ethnic enclaves voting. You'd have like an Irish community neighborhood fucking like ghetto leader who would basically like the corrupt politicians would go to them, and then they would just organize like every single vote in the community. And like you'd have like big men in the societies who would just like, they were known to like control the ethnic bloc vote. But today, today, where are the guys who control like the Irish ethnic bloc? Like, sorry,
Well, there are no.
where are the same
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
who 100 years ago controlled the Irish ethnic bloc vote
Well,
in America?
yeah,
They don't
yeah.
exist.
You
They
don't.
assimilate
No, but you don't. No, they don't assimilate because now what we've got instead is thousands of advocacy groups instead doing those jobs.
But what my point
Okay?
is, right? That system of politics existed in America, right? There were like all these Irish associations, there were German associations, there were Polish associations, and a lot of politicians. Like for example, I finished the LBJ series back in the early 20th century. Like the way that politics got done in a lot of these big city urban environments in America, it was quite corrupt. Basically, like, you know, there would just be like a guy who would just control like 500 blocks, 500 votes as like a block. That doesn't exist anymore in that same way, because like you like where are the guys who control like the fucking Polish vote in America? Where are the guys who control the fucking?
Well, no. It's a different world though. We're talking about back then in a world where it's just a printing press and the radio. Okay, now we've got the internet, and advocacy groups can just market their stuff on social media.
Let me say, somebody's going, oh, Drew's saying that Irish ethnic vote rigging in 19th century America justifies mass Indian immigration and vote rigging in Australia. That's not at all what I'm fucking saying at all. What I was saying is, here was an example in American history where there were like community associations, and you know it was really, you know, hard on ethnic lines and stuff like that. But over time, it just fully assimilated into the broader society.
Yeah, I just answered you. Back then, it was a different environment where you didn't have the technology you have today.
Now? Why is it so?
Because now you got social media. You can just put up, like, you've literally got politicians putting up posts in their ethnic languages saying vote for my, you know, ethnic party. So you don't need to have these, like what they used to do, right? Like you said, they would have like one guy who would control the vote, because it would be word of mouth or radio or television, and there'd be too much effort. So he's like, hey, look, we're voting for this guy. I've done the research. But now you've got, you know, everyone's connected to the internet. Everyone has access to all this information themselves. So what happens is now you've got advocacy groups that just market their opinions, and then the Sikhs or the ethnic group gets attracted to these advocacy groups who are marketing themselves, and then they follow their, you know, worldview.
I mean, sure. My broader question is, right, like, why is it that once there was an ability to assimilate, but now you're saying no, conveniently it's never possible ever again for assimilation to ever happen? Even if
I think assimilation's a myth, because you'll never make a foreigner an Australian. But I think they can fit in.
In America and Australia, we've seen assimilation work for many, many years. I agree right now the current migration rate is so high that it will damage assimilation. But I'm saying in general, the principle of assimilation, it is possible. And
I think assimilation is like the lesser of two evils.
Okay, like let me ask you this, right? Like Friendly Geordies. Who actually looks at Friendly Geordies and is like, oh, he's a fucking Croatian? Everyone just looks at Friendly Geordies and is like, he's Australian.
Yeah. Well, I call them proxy Australians. I mean, if they're like, you know, I'm very like, I think like Anglo-Celtics are the true Australians.
Yeah, I know, but you're the vast minority on this issue, because if you just asked an average person on the street, if Friendly Geordies is walking down the street, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm not.
You picked out a random fucking person off the street and was like, hey, what ethnicity is this guy? This guy? He's a white guy. No one's gonna be like, oh, it's fucking Croatian.
Yeah, I know, but you can't argue using public opinion or your opinion of what a public opinion is. Like, I'm just saying though, like you have. Yeah, I call these people like proxy Australian. Like I call them like, or like pseudo. And I'd say pseudo, right? So it's like, yeah, you're kind of like pseudo Australian.
Tell me in what way has like Friendly Geordies refused to assimilate, or what way have I refused to assimilate?
No, I would say you assimilated pretty well, and I'd say you're a pseudo Australian.
How? Okay, why am I pseudo rather than full Australian? I don't have any other citizenship. I've got no other homeland. If I go to Cyprus, I'm basically a foreigner there. So how am I?
Because you talk like one to an extent, like you have the same kind of cadence. You feel like the kind of guys I grew up talking with. You kind of understand the Australian culture, but you don't have the right ethnicity, in my opinion, to be a full Australian.
Like, what's the difference, right? Like, okay,
because you're Greek,
you're Anglo, I'm Greek, right? Yeah, okay, but like again, if you just
this is the WOG question.
What?
This is the WOG. We're doing the WOG question now.
Yeah, but that is part of it, right? Like, if you ask the they go, okay, this guy's just fucking white. But if you ask like fucking retarded, autistic internet racists, they're gonna be like, oh, he's not white because he comes from like fucking Sicily. Like, it's just it gets to a point where it's full autism, right? Because the average person just sees it as white.
I don't care what I just think the average person's an idiot. So
okay, but like in what actual way am I not an Australian?
Just ethnically, like blood-wise.
Okay, and I agree. I'm ethnically Greek. I'm not ethnically
Genetically.
Australian. But
Yeah,
how does
genetically
that,
you're Greek.
in what way does that limit me, or in what way does that change my sort of rights in Australia?
It doesn't change your rights. You got the same rights as me. No, I also don't think there's anything like this. Should it? No. I think you should have, like, for example, when we even came to Australia and found the Aboriginals, the Queen said that no, they're under the Crown now, so they have the same rights as British subjects. Does Joel realize? Yeah, I know. Does Lawrence realize he's further right than Joel Davis? Yeah, I know. I disagree with Joel on the question.
Okay, but this is my question, right? Oh, Swindon goes, if Cyprus went to war, Drew would care way more than an actual Australian. But I wouldn't be going out and should fucking like bomb Turkey. I never would do that.
Yeah, but you'd care way more than we would because it's your people.
Well, I see my people as Australian. I still don't want Cyprus to be invaded by Turkey. I think that'd be bad because they're European people. I don't want Turkey to fucking invade them.
Yeah, but you gotta I would say I would imagine that you'd have some sort of like instinctual bond to your kin.
Sort of. I mean, sort of like when
I that's so natural. Like I'm mainly Irish, Scottish, and English, right? So I still have I look at what's happening in Ireland, and I feel a lot more strongly about that than I would about anywhere else in the world. Because that's my blood. I say that's where my ancestors come from. Like, it's natural. It's good. It's a good thing.
Okay, sure. I'm just, here's the question, right? Like, okay, I'm actually saying with you, you're right. I'm not ethnically white Australian. I'm ethnically Greek. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But for all intents and purposes, I'm basically Australian because the reality.
Yeah, no, Drew, you're pseudo-Australian.
But why pseudo? Like, what does that actually mean? What does that actually
mean? Because you need the blood part to be an actual full-blood Australian.
Okay, so
and you're ethnically a Greek.
Okay, let's say I accept
you're ethnically a Greek. You're culturally an Australian, so you're pseudo-Australian.
Okay, so let's ask this, right? Let's say I accept your framing of the issue. Okay, I'm a pseudo-Australian, right? What does that materially change for me? How should my life change if I'm a pseudo rather than a full Australian?
Nothing really. Just live the same life. It's just about the conversation and the narrative that we talk about. Because the problem is that we like what's happening now is that when we're trying to advocate for closing the border, for example, we've now got ethnic groups saying you're not even Australian. Like the real Australians are Aboriginals, or the real Australians.
That whole narrative nonsense. Of course, I disagree with that narrative nonsense.
Yeah, German pseudo-Australians. Yeah, I only count Anglo-Celtic people as Australian. That's my position at the moment.
I just don't understand though, like what the point of that is though. What's the point of that? Because
it's not about what's the point. It's about just going back to the. It's about going back to the origins and the definition of our nation. Like,
let me ask you this, right? So if you go to America, there are people who technically they'd be Swedish. Like if you looked at their family trees, they'd be like German Americans or they'd be Swedish Americans, right? But they've been in the sort of they're part of America for so long that they just only really identify as white. A good example of this is Trump, right?
Yeah.
Who actually looks at Trump and who actually looks at Trump and they're like, oh, Trump's a German American. No one really thinks that. Obviously there's the joke, people said Trump for a while or whatever, but no one actually looks at Trump and they're like, oh, Trump is a pseudo-American because he came from fucking Germany rather than
No, but American, the American identity is really different to the Australian identity because they really embraced the melting pot theory later on. I think there were lots of writings about the American founding fathers saying that America is just a white people, and I agree. But I think in the modern era, when you came into the 20th century, you had the melting pot theory adopted by America a lot more than Australia. So they started saying this is where the myth of the American dream comes from.
The same metric. There will be guys in Australia who are if you looked at the family tree, they'd technically be German Australians, right? But they would just see themselves only really as Australian. And if you ask the average person, is this person a fucking pseudo-Australian or Australian? They'd just be like, it's a white Australian. I don't get it. So I just don't understand. It just doesn't make sense to me. I can understand. I've
got a very extreme definition of an Australian.
But my question is why? What does it serve?
Because the point? It's not about what it serves. It's about is it true or not? And I think it's true because if you go back to the history of what Australia was founded for and who it was founded for, and you go back to the symbology in Australia, the Union Jack means Scottish, Irish, and English. And I think there was a very conscious reason that we put the Union Jack in that flag to remind us that these are the founding stock. And then when the White Australia policy came in, that wasn't like, oh yeah, we're going to go try and find Germans. Like, no, we're trying to find Brits. And the British,
Here's
Britons.
an interesting question. I want to put this question up, right? Vietran, he goes, if the defense here is that British culture is good, then why not judge other culture on specific merits? So, for example, Asian industriousness, like East Asian, like why not say?
I can acknowledge.
What do you say?
Sorry, go on. What was the end of your question?
So, okay, like he's basically saying, if our metric here is that we define, like we say Australia is culturally British. The reason that's a good thing is because British culture is good for this list of reasons, right? And you provide the list of reasons. So this guy asks, then why not judge cultures by specific merit? So you might say, okay, this culture is bad, but for example, Japanese culture, they're hardworking, they integrate very well.
I do.
Sure. So why would we then say we don't want Japanese Australians? Like, I don't know why.
Because again, like you're just bringing unnecessary conflict and confusion, and you're allowing for you're allowing. No, I'm not talking. I know the Japanese are lovely people, okay, but I'm saying you're allowing these things. You're allowing these things to happen. It's like what is it? What's that law? It's like anything bad that can happen will happen. That law, I forget the law, but it's that one. It's like Murphy's law. Anything that bad that can happen will happen. So if you allow hundreds of thousands of Japanese in, you're going to start getting them they're going to start taking care of themselves. They're going to start hiring their own people, which they do. They buy up businesses and they just hire their own people, and that's a problem in and of itself. So yeah, and they're just not like us. They're like just so different to us, just in cadence, in their personalities, in their just mannerisms. And it's just foreign, and we just kind of like to stick to our own. When I've talked to Japanese people, I think they're lovely people, but they're not my people. Like, we just don't vibe.
Can I ask you this, right? So, do you ever see? So, okay, you're listening here. You're saying you like Japanese culture. You think Japanese people are nice. You just don't want them here.
I can find good in like any culture. I can find the goods in every culture.
Okay. Would you say it's fine to have 20,000 Japanese Australians, or would you say it's fine to have 50,000? Like, is there a level where you would say, okay, we can have these people, or no? Like, I don't know. Like, what's your
yeah. I'm not like deport every single foreigner. That's one place where I think I disagree with a bit. What level? And this is why I can't give the ought of like saying, okay, the Chinese that have been here for 50 years, I don't know, since like the early 60s.
There actually are Chinese Australians who've been here for like literally more than 100 years. Like, there are families.
Yeah, sure. So for these families, like, I don't think I have the right to say that no, these people need to get deported. Okay, that's why my suggestion is simply get rid of the international students, get rid of the temporary visas. Then when you have a very intensive national focus on having this conversation and taking votes, primarily from those Australians who are not overseas born, from the actual Australians, and get them to decide what they want to do, okay? Because we need to start putting an emphasis on raising the Anglo birth rates in this country, the Anglo-Celtic birth rates, and reinforcing the British culture that built this country. Otherwise, we're gonna just fall into pieces. We're gonna form into like tribal fucking volcanism.
Okay, can I ask you this, right? Would you accept, or would you like, for example, would you have open borders for like white Europeans in your worldview?
No, I think any migration at this point is detrimental to the labor force.
Okay, so really, at the end of the day, you're not even necessarily advocating pan-whiteness or whatever. It's just Anglo-Celtic.
I mean, look, no, I would accept. Like if the country, let's say hypothetically, was like 60% Anglo-Celtic, and then like 30% Germanic or whatever other Europeans, and then like 10% Asian. Okay, I mean, if that worked out in a peaceful way, that's fine. But I would still like there to be a definitive explanation of what the Australian people were founded on. And I think you need to go back to that being Anglo-Celtic people.
Let me ask you this, right? Okay, we just both acknowledge that there are Chinese families in Australia who've like been here for like literally like 100+ years, right?
Yeah.
And according to your conception of being an Australian, you think these people are not Australian?
No, they're not Australian. They're Chinese.
Okay.
They're Chinese.
Even if it's like 5 generations, 6 generations, 100+ years, they're fully assimilated.
Yeah.
So okay, this is the question, right? What's the implication of them not being Australian? Because when I hear you say that they're not Australian, then I start to think, okay, this guy is eventually going to say that even people who've been here for 100+ years should just be deported. And I think that's cruel and wrong.
I don't think I'm not saying they should just instantly be deported. I think that's where I disagree with like the NSN, maybe to an extent. I don't know. Like again, it's one of these things of like it's a national conversation we need to have. If look, a vote was taken.
This is the problem.
Hold on. Let me answer you. If a vote was taken, okay, nationally, from all the Anglo people, from all like what I would deem as actual Australians, and they took a vote and they said, yeah, we want to deport all the Chinese. Okay, then so be it. Okay, so that's what I'm saying.
I think that's wrong. Because I think people should be judged as individuals.
Yeah, but I'm talking about, whether it's the consensus of the country or not, of the nation or not. Okay, and we should be in control of our nation as democracy. If we are a democracy, we should be able to have these votes, and we should be allowed to have these conversations. That's all I'm advocating for.
Just explain to us what would be the actual benefit of deporting a family that's been here for 6 generations. They see themselves as fully Australian. They don't even speak Chinese or whatever. They're just different ethnicity. Like, what's the actual benefit there? What does that actually do? Okay. Why do that?
Again, look. In my heart of hearts, I don't have a want to deport those kind of people. Okay. So I don't like.
And you have taken photos with them and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. And I think I disagree with a lot of some of the things. Like, I'm a Catholic through and through. Like, I think all races created equally in the eyes of God. I think we're all equal value as human beings. So no, I disagree with them. I think a handful of things. That's why I'm not part of the organization. But I think they're interesting guys. I think they explore interesting ideas, and they've opened my eyes up to these sorts of ideas. Well, I think particularly, my particular interest was with Joel and what he was, particularly your debate actually with Joel was what really like opened my eyes up to the Anglo-Celtic history stuff and looking into the history of the White Australia policy and that. So it's mainly just that. I think our history has been bastardized. And I think we've been taught like a false history of what Australia was built upon and what the actual like intentions of the people who built the country were.
Here's a question by this guy, Nicholas. He goes, why they're not Australian, even if they're fully assimilated, raised as Australian, born in Australia, don't speak another language, it's just like for all intents and purposes, they think like an Australian. They only see like they've got no other place to live. Like if they were forced to live in that country, they'd be a foreigner.
Because there's ethnicity.
I would actually be a foreigner there because at the end of the day, I only really like I'm fully Australian basically. Like if I went to Cyprus and everyone's speaking Greek, I don't speak Greek. So what would I do? I just think that's wrong.
But if you learn Greek, you would fit in fine.
I don't think so necessarily because
you would because your mother would have passed some Greek culture down to you.
Dude. There are heaps of Greeks who think like Drew's fucking like too westernized because like there are heaps of Greeks for example who like love Russia because it's like Slavic pan-Slavic Orthodox culture and shit like that, and they love Serbia and stuff. And I'm not a fan of that stuff, right? So Again, I'm talking about just like definitions. I'm just talking about the fact that when this country was founded, when the concept of Australia was created, there was an implicit ethnic identity tied to that, which was Anglo-Celtic, which is represented in the Union Jack in our flag. And it's only since the 70s that identity was eroded and perverted into this multicultural idea. Okay, here's a good question, right? And I think you've basically touched onto it slightly before. Mm-hmm. Look at the figure of Gaut, right? He's born in Australia. For all intents and purposes, like he's never lived in another country.
He's not Australian.
Okay,
dude, do you know Gaut has he has the Sudanese flag in front of the Australian flag on his TikTok profile.
Let me say this. I know that ethnically, this is the difference between ethnicity and nationality, right? Mm-hmm. When Gaut runs a good race, every Australian gets proud. Like you look at the comments, people are proud of Gaut. They embrace him as an Australian. So why would you say how can you say he's not Australian and he shouldn't be here? I
think they're confused about the history and the truth about the Australian identity.
I think that's just spastic because if the fucking vast majority of the country is good on this guy, he
True. Some people are celebrating. Some people.
Dude, when he broke his records, he was flying the Australian flag behind him, and then you just have a bunch of subjects. You have a bunch of
What does that mean?
Going it's not really Australian, guys.
He's not really Australian.
What?
If you held up the Australian flag and started cheering and saying, "Yes, we must like cut off hands for people who steal," it doesn't make you Australian just because you're holding the flag.
Okay,
That doesn't mean shit.
Okay, what particular values does he have that are not Australian?
It's about the values. I'm talking about it's part, again. We're just gonna have to agree. Like we're gonna disagree, Drew. I think it's an ethnic thing. And then, like I said, he even puts his Sudanese flag in front of the Australian flag in his TikTok, showing that he has.
But if you look at all his interviews
Because
and you look at his victories and stuff like that, he puts it all down to Australia.
Yeah, because we're a first world nation. We gave him some of the best opportunity in the world, where he had a safe place to learn and develop. Like, yeah, he should be thanking us.
Then,
but he's not. But he's not an Australian. If I went to Japan and I like started learning all these kind of crazy tech skills or whatever it was, I went to Taiwan or Vietnam, learn all these crazy like engineering skills. I'm like, yeah, thank you, Taiwan, for letting me come here. Thank you for your amazing education.
That means
but I wouldn't start saying, "Oh, I'm Taiwanese now."
No, but
celebrate me as your Taiwanese champion for learning code.
No, but what we're saying is like the average person on the street, they look at Gout and it's like they view.
I think the average person is an idiot.
So does everyone's retarded but you?
Not just me, but I think majority of people. Dude, majority of people can't name anything like historical. You would know this if you're well read. Most people don't know shit. The average person on the street.
Yeah, but I don't think like.
Well, no. When it comes to philosophical and like, things like this.
When it comes to Gout, right? I think Australia deserves the credit for its success because it's true. The Australians.
Yeah, we do.
Like that. So we deserve the credit for its success. So why are you now saying we don't? You're saying you reject it. You don't want to claim it. You don't want him to even be in the country. I think that's retarded. Like
I never said I don't want him to. I never said I don't want him to be in the country. Did I say that?
Well, you're saying he's not Australian. What's the implication of him not being Australian?
Again, I'm not making any odd statements about him staying in the country or not. I'm not like on the NSN position of like deport everyone instant. Okay, I think there's some nuance to that discussion. I think practically speaking, obviously that's kind of a hard thing to snap your fingers and make happen. But all I'm saying is we need to set in stone the definitions so we can have a conversation around national identity. And what's happening is when people like me come out and I start trying to set the definitions for myself, I get migrants coming out, call me racist, call me all these kind of things, just attacking me for just saying, no, this is what I define it as based on the evidence that I'm pulling from history.
Appeal to the majority, fellas. Okay, look. How much longer should we go? Do you have any questions that you want to?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of going around in circles now. Okay. Do I have any questions? What's a woman, Drew?
What's a woman? Adult female.
Okay, so it's biology, right?
Yeah, I do think.
Can a woman become a man?
Like, no, I don't think so. But like, I still wouldn't like. Look, I still feel bad for transgender people, and I don't want them to be discriminated against or bullied or anything. I think they do exist.
Yeah, okay.
If you go back through history, they do exist. Like people, it has always happened in all these different societies, so it does exist.
Do you think it's natural?
Well, look, it's happened in almost every culture throughout history, and I think some people maybe are just born like that. Like there is a certain amount of people who are just born as like hermaphrodites, right?
Do you think? No, there's not. Hermaphrodites don't exist.
There are people who are born into sex. There are some people who are born into sex.
Not like biology, like as far as the chromosomes go.
I mean, sure, but look, my point is like, if somebody is like, I don't fully understand it. I just don't want anyone to be like bullied, or if somebody asks me like, can you use these pronouns? I'll just use them out of I'll just be nice to them because like I just like to be quiet to people. I don't want to bully people. I don't want to have people discriminated against because I think some people are just born like that, right? And I don't understand it necessarily, and I don't.
Do you think it's a mental illness?
What do you say? Sorry.
Do you think it's a mental illness?
It can be accompanied by a horrendous amount of mental suffering, obviously, to feel like you're born in the wrong body and stuff like that. It's a hard thing. I feel really bad for people in that situation, and I would just want them to be able to live their life without being bullied and discriminated against. I think it's a pretty fair position.
Do you think children can consent to hormone therapy?
I don't think that there should be major medical interventions with children. I think that's wrong.
Good man. At what age do you think children should be able to get hormone therapy or sex change operations?
I don't think it should be done with children. I think even if somebody is an adult and they can make
So
a fully
18?
yeah, 18
18?
plus. Yeah, if somebody's a full adult and they can properly make the medical decision and it's a fully informed choice, then fair enough. I don't think it should be done with children because there are cases where children have changed their mind and stuff, and you can look.
A lot of them.
Look. I feel bad for people who have that struggle and have that suffering and stuff like that. I know that. I know that they've had discrimination in society and stuff like that. I don't want them to be discriminated against. I don't want them to be bullied. I'm a Christian. I believe that all human lives have value and all people should deserve dignity. And I feel bad for people who have that struggle. And I get you.
Okay. No, that's the only question I have. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't know. Do you think there's anything we should cover before we go? Because we've been doing for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, 2.5 hours is good, man. No, it's been a good chat. I think we've done a good job.
And look, to be fair, at least it was pretty respectful. We didn't have any actual full blown.
I'm a chill guy. Right?
Yeah. It's better to have it in a more intellectual thing and everything. I don't know. Do you think there's any main topics that we should discuss or?
No, final comments from the set comment section if they're watching. Maybe.
I'm just gonna say as my final comment.
I meant read comments, but we can do final comments.
Yeah. But I'll just say my final comment, right?
Sure.
Final comment. At the end of the day, I'm a Christian. I believe all human beings, created equal in worth and value. And look, I don't want Australia to be radically changed. I want the same Australia that I grew up with to remain the same that I grow into. I want my kids to grow up into an Australia that I recognize. So I don't want to see massive radical demographic change, etc. I'd like to see things stabilize. I'd like to see overall a lower migration rate because there are problems with housing and also problems with cultural assimilation and stuff like that. Where we do really, really disagree is I think that people can assimilate into being Australian no matter the race. I think if somebody makes a genuine effort to become part of the culture, they respect the country, they genuinely have respect and love for the country, and it's their main primary allegiance and stuff, I think anybody can become Australian. And where we differ is you have a very restrictive view where you even think even Greeks or Italians are just even Germans are not properly Australian, which I think is a very, very harsh. And look, the problem is I think that I know you don't say this, and I know you're saying well, I haven't endorsed this, etc. And you're saying, well, we should just have this conversation about it. But my worry is the logical outcome of this view that even people who are Germanic are not Australian. The logical outcome is that these people shouldn't be in the country, and I think that's wrong. If somebody's
okay, slow down. Now you're starting the debate up again. Let's do final comments.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sum up my position, right? I'm just trying to sum up.
No, but here's the thing. I didn't say that because I'm not saying that people white people living in Japan should be deported from Japan because they're living in Japan. I'm saying that those white people need to recognize, and they do recognize, that they're not Japanese while they're there. Even if they learn the language, even if they learn the culture, they'll never be Japanese. That's fine. Just accept that and acknowledge that, and then live in harmony and enjoy your lives.
So, but I just don't understand your whole thing that Drew, as long
because it's about truth, Drew. It's about fucking truth, mate. It's about getting to the definitions of reality and finding out what we are. And I'm talking about identity and history, and these are set in stone things.
I just think it's very extreme to be even a German guy, a guy who doesn't even really he can't even trace his Germanic history or whatever, right? He's just
yeah. Well, I mean, these are the consequences of this is the consequence of modernity. We've diluted all of our cultures down to nothing, so that we don't know where we are anymore.
There, I've actually given you an example where it's it literally is for all extents and purposes, almost indistinct.
I know. Okay, we're going to go around circles. I'm going to do a final comment. I'm going to do a final comment, and then we'll read comments.
Okay, that's my final comment. You have your final comment, and then
read comments, pack it up.
Yeah.
If there's comments. Okay, my final comment is I just think that we need to pay a very close eye on the demographics of the country and have a think about what we want the makeup of this country to be. And I think we need to personally reverse some of the damage done by multiculturalism and by all this left-wing ideology that has come in telling us that an Australian can be anything when it's clearly not, when we've clearly got a history with prime ministers and founding fathers who explicitly defined what an Australian was, and we built a nation based upon those definitions. Okay, so anyway.
Okay. One responding to this comment by Dilby, I think there is obviously social contagion in it, but I think at the same time there has always been transgender people in history. So yeah, I think right now there is social contagion, obviously, because it's become a big thing in society. But I think just like in overall, like I don't think transgender people were like invented like last year. You know, I think if you look in the historical records, like there are people who are transgender, etc. Anyway, we've got a comment by Vietran, right? Let's have a quick answer of this one.
Oh yeah, if ethnocentrism is not about aesthetics, but it's about goodness of society, then if something you go through an Indian festival would be bad, even if you spoke, acted, and lived like a British. Then what does that even mean?
I think he's basically saying like, okay, Rishi Sunak, for example,
yeah,
he speaks British, he acts British, he lives like a British person, but he goes to a Holi festival. Like, why is that bad in Australia or whatever? Because
because it comes down to blood. I'm talking about blood. So you can't change the objective reality of what your genetics are. Okay, so he's using a cultural argument. I'm saying it's cultural and ethnic. Okay.
I mean, okay.
Again, we're good. Again, let's not debate. Yes, blood.
We'll start back up again. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's.
I'm looking at the comment section. Someone says Drew win. I know most of the people on your side are saying you've won. I mean, I think it's probably an outcome where.
Oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Comment who you thought won.
Well, your fans are gonna say. I think it's literally, dude. This is the thing, right? This is the thing with all internet debates. Like, there's not going to be a single person on your side who thinks that I won, and there's not going to be a single person on my side who thinks.
Yeah, well, let's just get
Yeah.
Can you do polls? Can you do polls on this?
I think you can somehow, but I'm not necessarily sure how to do it.
No, damn, that'd be fun.
Okay,
can I do it?
We've got a comment by Vietran. He says, so everyone should be identified and treated based on 23andMe.
I think that's when you stuck into the. I think just like majority your genetic makeup. Drew won. I'm not racist anymore. There you go. You converted one of them.
That's good. Okay, that's true. So
nice.
True.
That's a good note.
We've got one comment here. I just don't see ethnicity as any meaningful difference between people. Values and principles are the most important thing. Look, I do think
because I think there is like a neurophysical relation between your genetics and your ethnicity and your cadence and your personality and your predispositions. I think you need to see them in like German people. Like I think German people are different to Irish people, and they just have a bit of a different predisposition to certain characteristics. And I think only Anglo-Celtic people can really appreciate and understand Australian culture to the depth that it should be understood.
No way Drew accepts Sudanese sprinters in Cyprus. Drew, I'm not fucking Greek ethno-nationalist either, but whatever. This is pretty funny.
Boys.
Drew won. I'm gay now. That's pretty funny, actually. Okay. Is there any? Should we? Okay. I think we can probably wrap up.
It's good. It's good, man. No, good chat. It's good to meet you.
No, it's good chat. Look.
Good time.
Obviously, we have strong differences of opinion. It's good to chat. It's good to have debates. It was interesting.
No, it's good. Sharpen your knife. Sharpen your sword.
And look,
she's not tweaking. You can tweak.
And look, like I debated a communist yesterday. Today I basically debated an ethno-nationalist. I'll basically debate anyone as long as they're not fucking advocating like murdering me, right? So yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. Good on you.
It was a good chat. I appreciate
this. This is what the country needs more of. Young guys having open discussions and getting into the weeds.
We need more young autistic men to debate whether Germans and Irish are proper Australians. Very well.
Yeah, exactly.
Very well.
Rock on.
All right.
Okay. Go in.
All right. Well, we'll sign off.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks everyone for watching.
Easy. God bless. Bye bye.
Bye bye. God bless.